If you could hide a color in the twinkling of an eye, and then continue onward with that same speed to fly, do you think that you could ever, through all eternity, find out the generation where gods began to be? Or see the grand beginning where space did not extend? Or view the lost creation where gods and matter end? Methinks the spirit whispers, no man has found pure space, nor seen the outside curtains where nothing has a place. The works of God continue, and worlds and lives abound. Improvement and progression have one eternal round. There is no end to matter, there is no end to space, there is no end to spirit, there is no end to race, there is no end to virtue, there is no end to might, there is no end to wisdom, there is no end to light, there is no end to union, there is no end to youth, there is no end to priesthood, there is no end to truth. It's monthly Mormon Mondays. It's time for the secret handshake. Tune in and reach through the veil. It's time for monthly Mormon Monday.
Okay, it's time for another dose of Mormonism for this monthly Mormon Monday. We've got a doozy lined up. We might have special guests, but regardless of who shows up, we've got some really interesting things we've danced around before, but we're going to do a slightly more of a deep dive into a whole bunch of different stuff. But first, I'm Paranoid American, and this is my co-host, Heidi Love. How you doing, Heidi?
Good. I'm happy to be here as always. We always have such a fun time chatting about all the Mormon mayhem. I mean, goodness.
I wish American history in school was just a fraction of as interesting as this kind of stuff. I would have paid attention more. Maybe not. Probably not.
Yeah.
But it would have been cool if there was tidbits.
Yeah. I mean, Howard Hughes definitely is a whole like history book in itself, but I don't think they want that out there.
Well, they didn't want him out there. In fact, they kind of ran him into the ground, and he became, from everything I can tell, and it's an enigma, right?
Right.
The entire life of this guy, and movies made about him, and books and documentaries, but it seemed that he was almost a personified CIA proxy that went a little out of control because he realized at a certain point, wait, I got more money than you do. Like, just talking to the CIA, or at least like I can just be my own CIA, which made him kind of dangerous. That's my impression.
Yeah, rich millionaires and billionaires are always useful. I mean, we see it going on right now with the president.
Do we have a Howard Hughes though? Like, is it right to compare Howard Hughes to say Elon Musk or Bill Gates or something? It feels like they're in different classes.
I mean, Elon would be the closest thing for me, but he does not have as high IQ as Howard Hughes, just FYI.
I kind of agree in this, and I think it's almost universal, unless it's just a running inside joke, but that Elon Musk buys these companies, but he doesn't necessarily understand them a whole lot. There was one in particular that happened last week, I think, so that this will be somewhat topical, where he was like, there's a bunch of people that are 200 years old that are, on the Social Security program, which I don't doubt. I absolutely believe there's all sorts of scam going on in there. But he mentioned this very specific number, and that number lined up directly to how dates in this old programming system called COBOL, which I actually know about because they used it in the military for weather systems, I believe. But he mentioned that the exact number that would make it be 200 years or whatever, 240 years, whatever it was. And it kind of just was this glaring, obvious thing that, okay, you saw this report and you put A and B together, but you didn't really understand what you were looking at. And you just went directly to Twitter and you just started blabbing off. And it seems that he does that almost every time he interacts with the outside world. Someone out there is like, wait a minute, I'm an expert in this and you don't know what you're talking about.
But he pretends he does, and he has lots of money. So I think Howard Hughes is in a different class that way. Yeah, he did know. He did.
It seemed like if you try to call Howard Hughes out, he would school you right there on the spot and tell you all about whatever endeavor he was. But also, he lived in a different era where there wasn't free access to all this information. So maybe you could have fact checked Howard Hughes. We'll never know, right?
Well, and it was a different time, like with the whole invention business. Like not everyone had money to market things, whereas now they have to hold a little at the cuff because somebody will go copy it and put it out before you do. So back then, Howard was just like the one. He's like, I'm doing all this stuff, but Elon's got to be a little bit silly, I think, sometimes, and kind of be the village idiot, for lack of a better word. So he looks less scary. Yeah.
Court jester is like a mixture between a robber baron and a court jester. So maybe he gets away without losing his head or having to collect his pee and nails inside of jars for who knows
exactly. Yeah, well, probably because he knew about how to recreate a human and he was keeping his DNA to himself. Except when he threw it at people. Anyway.
Is that true? Did he throw it at people?
Oh, apparently. Yeah, apparently. Says some of the aides. Maybe they didn't bring him his banana nut ice cream because that's what he liked to eat.
Well, and this actually makes sense. This is actually a good place to tie in, like, what the heck does any of this have to do with Mormons? And we touched on the Mormon Mafia in a previous episode, but it wasn't as specific as this very tight group of people that were also known as the Mormon Mafia, even in the 60s, right? 60s and 70s. They were known as this. This isn't just us coming up with a catchy headline. They were called the Mormon Mafia. And my understanding, the simplified version is that Howard Hughes goes into a hotel somewhere and he rents out the top floor, like the penthouse suite, and he stays for like a month or something. And then eventually the owner tells him that he needs to get out, and they get into this big fight. And Howard Hughes just straight up buys the entire hotel. And the guy that was like bitching at him, he kicks him out, and he just lives there. And as he's there, he realizes that he wants to sort of own and operate more of Vegas. He wants to have a bigger stake in it. And in order to do that, he looks around and he's like, man, if I could get these Mormon guys to help me out, they're not going to get swept up in the drinking and the booze and the girls and the gambling. Most importantly, they just care about money and whatever their mission is, with the extra little cherry on top of like the whole obedience factor, like and the secrecy, right? You get
halfway MK Ultra programmed already.
Right. Yeah. It's already been done. It's almost like pre-washed lettuce, right? Like you can just open up the bag and go right to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have to tell you, I think that's true even to nowadays. I was talking to a lady as I left this morning from work, and we were talking about, oh yeah, it's just so hard. You're still raised in it. Like your brain is still in it. She even said, like, I've been out for a long time and it'll still little things. Look, I'm like, no, I get it. It's a daily process to be like, no, we're not doing that. Like stop that brain process. But
and I mean, it is smart, although this is something that I would like to understand. And I already know your answer, I think. So let me just tell you what I think you're going to say. You're going to be like, well, it's the money, of course. And it's money. But why is it that Mormons are not allowed to take part in the vice of gambling and drinking and everything that would have to do with the casino, but they are allowed to work in the casinos for casinos? What's the explanation? How are you allowed to get around that? Why is it acceptable for Mormons to spread vice to other people, just not themselves?
I think this goes back to the Goyim. Hi.
Hey, we got Chaney up in here. Hey, Chaney. Everyone go give Chaney a like and a follow. Sure, links is in the description and everything. Project Chaney.
Yes.
I'm excited. I can't wait to be educated about the Mormons more.
Oh, the Mormons, they're always up to no good. But yes, I think it's like the goyim, like what you were saying, like, okay, the whole rule was don't touch the dice. And so that whole part of that was because they knew they could do everything else, but you don't actually, and it looks bad, right? To this day, you'll meet Mormons that are like knee deep in some nefarious business, but not them. Oh, I'm not the one. I don't own the company. I just work there. Like,
No, I have to ask because I take things literally way too often. Are they literally not allowed to touch dice? Like, what if they got hired for the casino and they have to run the craps table, or someone's like, "Hey, take these. You work here. Take these dice and go give them to that guy." Are they allowed to touch dice? They just can't gamble, or they're not allowed to touch dice at all?
We can't gamble. We just can't gamble.
Okay, but
so
you can like
that was Howard Hughes's little word. Yeah, like don't touch the dice for it. Yeah.
Oh, that's what he told them.
Well, he liked them because they don't touch the dice. That was his little saying. Yeah. So it was kind of funny.
If you're at home with the big Mormon family, all 40 or 50 of you, however many there are, the Monopoly games probably take like months to get through, but you're allowed to touch dice in that case, right? It's just if money's involved. Okay.
Yeah, just gambling. And
so can you play like poker for goldfish or something? Or is I mean,
I would say it has been done. I would say it has been done depending on, remember, you have like the most strict people ever and then the least strict, like over here. And you might find some people in the middle that are like, oh, we do that every Friday. And you might talk to somebody that's like, I would never, like clutch my pearls. Yeah. So it just depends.
Well, the Mormons here just are a transition from Howard Hughes into getting to Vegas. But that's sort of their entire role here. I mean, this one guy in particular ends up being a huge thing. This is E. Perry Thomas. You've mentioned him before. I had to read about him just a little bit, but one of the things that was interesting to me is that he ends up being the mentor of Wynn, and like the Wynn hotels. And I worked for Wynn Hotel maybe like a decade ago, but like I was involved, and it was funny because I was also working for him right during the middle of a project in which somebody Me Too'd him, and he got ousted out of his own hotel and got kicked off his board and everything. But I guess in like the degrees of Kevin Bacon way, I'm closer to the Mormon Mafia than I ever thought I was.
Oh, there you go. See, you never know. You never know where you're going to run into one of these people. But Thomas was really important. He is he's called the Quiet Kingmaker of Vegas. He basically he was one of the first people to ever tap into the Teamsters Union pension fund. But he's a Mormon. Hey, he's a good guy, right? He was also in the CIA.
So just to get this out of the way, Chaney, I don't think you've been on this particular show before. You're welcome back anytime. How open are you to converting to Mormonism? Just so anyone watching knows whether or not they're wasting their time.
I feel like I would be the best first wife for the right polygamist male. Like, I think I would have been good middle management. I would have kept the other hens in check. We could have, I think me and the right Mormon male, we would have taken over Utah.
There it is. I mean, you could still make that happen because, there's some crazy mofos out there that think they're the bloodline of Jesus. They got a lot of money. They'll take you for a first wife. I'm not kidding.
I couldn't be the womb now, but I could keep the other ladies in check. And I think also it there are some things about it that I kind of agree with in an old village type thinking way. Like, it would just be easier for all the ladies if they helped out each other more like we used to. And so
they're not
I do
very
think
nice that way. They're kind of mean, and they live in separate houses usually.
See, it's like my fairy tale of being like big love is shattered.
Yes, the first wife has the most clout though, so you picked a good stance there because she has the most clout, but she's also the only one that's legally married to him, right? So it's kind of a nice position to be in. You get a little more of the
Oh,
okay.
wow.
So it's like whoever gets there first gets most of the benefit. It's not like whoever came last gets to take all of the glory.
The last one gets, from what I've known from many people in polygamy, it's kind of like, okay, you're retiring these hens that are older, right? And you're getting these new ones. And my grandpa used to have a joke at the grocery store. He used to love to mess with people when I would be with him. And he would have my grandma and me and somebody else. And he would say, oh, these are my wives. And I'm like, you're such a creep. Cut it out. And then he would say, well, they would say, what's that one for? She goes to work. And he's not wrong. This is kind of real. She goes to work. What does that one do? Oh, she runs the house. Oh, what does this young one do? Oh, she has the babies. So that's kind of how it goes.
The weird part is in like the money structure of it all, first wives could end up with a ton of power over the whole rest of the family if they just decided to like be modern and get a divorce.
Yeah, well, there has been instances of that, even on television, right? We want to talk about sister wives. Sister wives did do a divorce situation. She gave up her stance as the first wife, which I think was a huge mistake. It kind of destroyed the whole show because she had previous children from a previous marriage and they needed health insurance. Well, that's easy to do if they're your children, but not if they're not your children. Now you need a marriage. So she gave up her stance to let the fourth wife and the last wife take in the first wife type situation. It destroyed the whole family. So I don't know.
Tiger Lily was asking, how come women never have several husbands? Like, why isn't there reverse polygamy? I got to be crass and obvious here. It's all to do with the pregnancy, right? Like if you've got 50 husbands, you can only get pregnant by one of those husbands. But if you got 50 wives, you can get all 50 wives pregnant. Isn't that sort of one of the reasons?
Absolutely. Yep. They definitely want to spread their lineage. I was telling you about the Kingston clan really does believe they are actually from the bloodline of Jesus. So of course they want to spread their seed even more and they marry their sisters and stuff. So like really. But yeah, what was that about, Thomas? I missed that.
I was calling her out for just asking that, just because I don't know. I made an assumption in the back of my head. Maybe there was some other like biblical, symbolic reason behind it. And it leads to a question though, that what about IVF? Does IVF, if I, become one of those doctors that sort of like turns into a hoax and it's like a big scandal where everyone that comes into the fertility clinic gets Dr. Thomas's, fertility clinic sauce instead of the one they signed up for. If I'm Mormon, does that mean they're all going to my planet, or is there some kind of like fine print that you have to also have them go through the temple and get initiated and all that?
I actually have an answer to this question and a strange reason why, because my ex-husband, wanted to go through with me and my son was born. So I said, well, when do we have our son sealed to us? Because he was born after we hadn't been through the temple yet. I had to my ex-husband, and it got real quiet in the room. And I could tell we were going to have a conversation that wasn't going to go well with my redheaded, feisty ex-husband. And it didn't. It completely ended everything for the church part. And he said, you don't have to. And he said, well, what do you mean? I mean, I'm not sealed to my son yet. Why wouldn't I have to? And he said, well, you see, once we grant her temple divorce, she can only be married to one man, and you'll just step into those shoes. And he goes, what do you mean? And he said, are you telling me her deadbeat ex-husband that won't even take care of the other two kids that I'm raising is my son's fake dad in heaven? And he just lost his mind. I mean, it was like he was so red. he was like furious. I mean, the hair and the skin, it was just all bad. Yeah, that was the end of the Mormon trail for my ex-husband. So, yep. Yeah, it's all by proxy. Yeah, he was born under the covenant. So as long as
you wouldn't build a big tribe with just one womb and 15 men. You would only be having one kid at most, like every 15 months. It just wouldn't build, like you're not building a nest egg there. You
Or an
really
army.
know.
If you're trying to
Yeah,
build
or
a
an
literal
army.
army.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, if they're born under the covenant, technically, if that woman has been married in the temple, even if that baby was another person's, that baby would be considered whoever she's married to in the temples. So, as an answer to
Is
where the
there? I know
child-
we're on a little bit of a tangent, but now I'm curious. Is there
know.
a pecking order for the children of the wives? Like, if you're a child of the first wife versus a child of the fourth wife, do you have more seniority over the other kids regardless of age?
I mean, oftentimes, as we see it now, they are all in separate houses. I've known a lot of polygamists, and they don't even interact unless it's like Christmas or
Huh.
something. And so, like, Susie has her house and her kids, and Jenny has her house and her kids, and blah 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 blah. And then they actually have a calendar. And on Monday and Tuesday he goes to Jenny's, and Wednesday and Thursday he goes to her house. And they never kiss in front of each other. Like, they never do anything. Like, if they're all together, nobody gets to hold his hand. Nobody gets to do anything because they don't want to make each other awkward. So it's very.
And then the kids don't even hang out. Like, they don't play Nintendo together or anything.
Sometimes one wife will be the babysitter, and sometimes two wives will be oftentimes sisters, just so you, or mom and daughter. This does happen. And they then that's different. But they're not always guaranteed as close. Now, my brother-in-law was Warren Jeff's nephew. So he told me when he was growing up that, they had 30 kids and 3 wives. And they all were raised together very good, all like they were like a family, like a normal family. But he said that doesn't usually happen. So, yeah, weird.
Someone asking, why do you need so many kids? Literally because you're building an army. That's
And
kind
the
of
bloodline of Jesus thing. And they feel that they're superior in general. So, yeah. Yeah, they're kind of like the Jewish ideology of they're better, like, and the rest of the people are goyim, and that's the way it is. And like the only difference is we'll let you come. We're a lot nicer that way. Like, if you want to, get married and join our cult, then you don't have to be a goyim anymore. Now you're one of us, but you have to do the whole thing. You have to do the whole thing.
I like PK asked, did Mormons ever fight the Jesuits? I don't think so. I think the
They
Jesuits
are Jesuits.
They lost most of their power in the late 18th century. And then the Mormons came into power in the very early 19th century. So maybe like by 50 years. Otherwise, they probably would have fought each other if they hadn't already fell out of power.
I think they might have been friends, dude. I think they might have built one big army.
But the Mormons fought each other, right? So like they were down to scrap in the early 1800s, no?
Oh, it continued clear into 10 years ago. They were still shooting each other up. So, shit happens.
Well, I've got a good segue here, and that's the very opposite of having lots and lots of kids is to do what Howard Hughes did, who probably had as much, maybe even more money than the Mormon Church at that point in time. I don't know. Do you have any read on that? If Howard Hughes, do you think, had more money than the Mormons?
Yeah, I think so. I think at one time, I mean, they say what, 55 billion?
And he didn't have any kids or anyone to leave any of his stuff to. And in fact, one of the weird things, and this was common knowledge maybe 20, 30 years ago if you were an adult, but that he was so willing to just leave his money to anyone. Most of it went to LDS, or was slotted for LDS reasons. And another portion of it was going to go to some random dude called Melvin Dumar, who was just driving. He claims he was just driving by a brothel. Like, he wasn't going to the brothel. He was just driving by on the road, and he sees an old guy passed out. He thought it was a dead body, and he went out and he sees the guy's alive, and he helps him out. And as they're driving, he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about maybe applying for a job at this, Hughes Aircraft Corporation. And the old guy with his long fingernails and he smells like pee, and he's like, I own that company. And the Melvin guy's like, all right, Grandpa, we're gonna get you home. That's funny, right?
Yeah.
And then 10 years later, pictures come out of Howard Hughes looking like this old grizzly dude with long fingernails. And they kind of put 2 and 2 together. It was like, holy crap, that really was Howard Hughes. And apparently, allegedly, he left that guy in his will too. Some random guy that picked him up on the side of a brothel.
Yeah, 1/16 of the will, but I mean, it was considered a fake. I mean,
Well,
he
it was considered a fake, but one of the things that gave it credit, I guess, is that he described Howard Hughes as being this old man that was like shriveled up, and no one had seen Howard Hughes. So everyone made fun of this guy for trying to put these two things together. And then it came out he really was this old withered man. And that's what kind of gave it credit. But as far as I know, he died without ever getting the 1/16 he was promised.
yeah, he didn't get anything, but I will say this, he did not ever change his story till the day he died. So that is pretty, if he
I
was
believe
a
him.
liar,
I
that's
watched
wild.
the 11-minute news special. I believe him. I'm all in on this guy.
He was
I
a
would be that
very
kind of
strange guy.
eccentric. Where you give
Yeah.
1/16, because it even seems like so much of it, you could be held at gunpoint to give your wealth away to whoever you don't. But this one dude who you're like, okay, but 1/16, and you never have any like family, you don't have a wife because you just married Hollywood spies. So I just am like, who knows? Who knows?
So
Just some
true.
random dude. That's so
Yeah.
wild.
Well, he
Well-
couldn't have kids because he was just I don't know if you read about his relationship with his wife, but she was only required to spend 20 minutes per day with him, and he just wanted to look at her. He would have her come in and he would look at her. And I don't know if he knew how to like make that work through. She was like, I mean, they say, multiple starlets that hooked up with him said he was a great lover, but this poor lady that married him, she just got stared at. So
Huh.
weird. And actually, she's the reason why he met the Mormon Mafia. Do you know this? So Mayhew, which is he's not a Mormon, but he's a part of the Mormon Mafia. And he, ended up being the guy that he hires to be a detective to check on her because he thinks she's cheating because all he does is look at her. And I bet she was. I mean, good hell, like what?
He was
What?
a germaphobe. It seems like
Yeah.
sex would be a weird thing for him to.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I mean, but we know he had sex because he had syphilis. He had neurosyphilis of the brain. So, I mean, which is why he was eccentric, right? If you're rich and you get neurosyphilis, you're not crazy. You're eccentric if you're rich.
I know.
You can do whatever you
sometimes
want.
I wonder if that's not a jibby jabby.
Yeah. Oh, well, he did have 5. Speaking of that, he had 5 embedded needles in his arms upon autopsy. The old metal ones that hook onto the glass vials. Yeah, that's a fun time. They were lost inside his tissues of his arms. You don't do that to yourself. Like that's not a willing participant in anything. Not back then. No way. I'm not buying it. No.
Well, and this is where it gets kind of weird and crazy, I think, beyond just Vegas, Mormon Mafia, like CIA stuff. And I was looking into this movie, Diamonds Are Forever, which is a classic James Bond movie, which of course is based on the original books by Ian Fleming, who was also an intelligence operative. He helped set up the OSS, which was a precursor to the CIA. He was deep in all this, and he's the one that named James Bond 007, which was the link to John Dee, who was essentially the first MI6 agent in history, right? Back in like the 1600s. He was the very first 00 anything, and that kind of continued on. But there's this weird connection that in Diamonds Are Forever, this James Bond movie, it's about Howard Hughes, but the plot line is that there's this underground ring. I would allege it's like a CIA essentially. They're smuggling diamonds, and that's the way that they're raising their money. But throughout this process, they actually capture a billionaire, an eccentric billionaire that's living in the top floor of a hotel. Like it's exactly the story of Howard Hughes, and they essentially take him out and they replace him with a stand-in, and the stand-in has recordings of his voice, or he can redo the voice, and he essentially is just using all of Howard Hughes, or in this one, I think his name was it wasn't Walter White, like because that's Breaking Bad. It was like Wilbur White or something. And he ends up running this entire corporation, this $55 billion corporation, as if he's Howard Hughes, but he's really just this plant. And he then turns it into, because it's a James Bond movie, turns into a plot where he's going to build this huge satellite in outer space that's going to fire a laser at the Earth, and he's going to sell the keys to this thing to any of the world powers that are willing to pay the most. It is literally the plot from Austin Powers, but it was about Howard Hughes. And one of the funny things is that the main actor that actually played Howard Hughes worked in a hotel that Howard Hughes owned at the time and got scouted while Howard Hughes was in the hotel, camped out with his fingernails in his urine jars. And they hired this guy to play Howard Hughes in this movie that, you know, airs while Howard Hughes is alive to see it, which is wild that someone had the balls to do that. And that guy's name was Broccoli, by the way.
Yeah, Broccoli. I saw the Broccoli comment. It doesn't matter what my name is. My name is Broccoli. And I think they were just kind of poking fun at him, like, okay, if you really wanted to do the whole thing and take over somebody's life and you make them say it doesn't matter what my name is Broccoli, are you just poking the bear at this point? Like, oh, we can replace you, you know? But it makes you really think, because don't forget, E. Perry Thomas's name was the quiet kingmaker. He who has the king makes the rules. That brings a whole new meaning to this whole thing. And so I don't know. I'm just saying. It gets weird. Every single person that he was surrounded with, from the banker to Mayhew, the investigator just investigating his wife, all these people are either CIA or FBI and Mormons, except Mayhew. Mayhew is like the original Mission Impossible is what they filmed that after his life. He was very involved in some sketchy stuff. Mayhew
I
is
didn't
no
hear
joke.
this. Doc Fortune just said Broccoli, as in the people who took over the rights to James Bond a few days ago. I didn't hear about that. It would make
didn't know
sense if it was
that.
that same family.
That is wild, but that's also how it always seems to work. Like,
well, you know, Howard Hughes wasn't even on his own board when he was passed. So that's why they knew they would come out okay on probate, even though it took 34 years. Because most companies would fold, but it was just too big to fail. It was literally the first too big to fail. So,
Well, and there's some other really, really wild rabbit holes that we'll have to like go on other episodes. But I was looking into the fact that Howard Hughes was a huge financer of Richard Nixon. Like, if there was no Howard Hughes, we might not have had a Richard Nixon. And that I hadn't heard that particular thing before, because I haven't done a deep dive into Howard Hughes, but I have done a deep dive into the Bush dynasty. And I know that I've heard the same exact thing about Prescott Bush, that if there wasn't a Prescott Bush, there wouldn't have been a Howard or a Richard Nixon either, because he was the one that gave him all his political connections, not like financial, resources, but like the political resources. So it almost feels like there would be a very close link between the Bush family dynasty and Howard Hughes and the CIA. And I found one link in Zapata Oil. They bought an island, and they were using an island to do some sort of reconnaissance or CIA stuff, CIA fun spy stuff. And Howard Hughes was like owned the island at that time. So there's probably so much more overlap that I haven't even gotten into yet.
That has to do with the Bay of Pigs. That gets real messy over there. You're not wrong. Howard Hughes owned the island. He was forced to lease it to Bush. Bush said it was for his oil company, Zapata Oil, but what it really was part of Permindex and the hit for the Bay of Pigs. So like it was a huge ordeal. And that's why Nixon was so upset when they kept bringing up everything when they were like going into Watergate. He's like, this is going to go to the Bay of Pigs and you don't want to go there. So just shut up. Like he was kind of like, stop. And they wouldn't stop. But he was really like irritated because Howard Hughes had borrowed his brother a whole bunch of money. And he started a chain of something with it. I can't remember, but it was a payoff amount of money. And he did this all the time. Howard Hughes owned more politicians than that. But it definitely, he was a supporter of Nixon. And they actually say Howard Hughes's empire was behind JFK's assassination. So I absolutely know RFK's assassination was carried out by someone that was working for the Mormon Church, period. And that is on record. So Thane Eugene Caesar. And that's from like RFK's son himself even says this is who he knows killed his dad, Nasserhan. So yeah, it gets weird. And then you get into the Bay of Pigs stuff with the Bush stuff. Do you know what the ships were named over there in the Bay of Pigs? Was the Barbara, Barbara, like Barbara Bush, and something else that was like really close to the family. And they were like, cut it out. Stop talking about that. Well, cut your tongue out.
This is a good one. Is there a sync between Howard Hughes related to Ted Hughes, the writer of Iron Man? Hogarth Hughes, maybe. I mean, a lot of people liken the new version of Iron Man to Elon Musk. No way. That had to be Howard Hughes. There's no way that was Elon Musk.
Yeah, they say that. That's kind of rumored. I don't know about this author though, but that's what they say it was based off of.
And Elon's just a venture capitalist. He didn't invent anything, whereas Howard Hughes was actually inventing things. Like you would put him in the lab a lot of the times with, I would even say when people do talk about fake space, you could not fake anything unless you had Howard Hughes's know-how of not just technology, but how to make something in the sky look like it's moving.
He was an engineer. He went to Rice. His dad went to Rice. His dad was an engineer. He made one of the first ever powered bikes when he was like 12 or 13. It has a picture of him on the internet. He was super smart. His IQ was off the charts. That's why he was super crazy. You know, it was just too much.
And the other reason that I mentioned Nixon is, guess who was president for the Apollo 11 moon landings in 1969? That was right in the very beginning of Nixon's reign. It was in July, and he came in, January, because that's when they take over. So this connection between the CIA and Bush and Hughes, and this isn't also represented in the Diamonds Are Forever James Bond movie, because part of the plot of that movie is they also hire like a Stanley Kubrick type guy and fake the moon landings. So I wonder how much of this was just straight up disclosure versus people having fun with the conspiracy theories that were running around.
Howard Hughes says he saw aliens. He was a definite progenitor of the whole alien stuff. He wasn't shy about it whatsoever. He talked about it. And so I definitely think they knew a lot more than they let on, and they're intricately involved with the biggest one that ends up getting the biggest piece of the pie after all of this, other than the cousin, is the gays. And I know it's a funny name, but this is his name. I don't know what else to say. It's the gays. So, the gays ended up with quite the fortune because he took over Howard Hughes Medical. Then they found some will that left everything to the medical institute, and he took that over and almost worked there till the day he died. And he's like basically Mormon royalty at this point. He's worth so much money. His son became one of the quorum of the 70, and it's like top tier Mormon level here. We're talking, and guess who he worked with? His son, Mitt Romney and Halliburton. And it's such a big web that I finally was like telling you when it went to aliens, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just trying to find these companies, and now we're at aliens. And my husband's like, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I can't get my work done. And he's like, okay, crazy lady. Like,
these aliens won't leave me alone.
I know. He's like, you're really deep into something I don't want to know about. He's like, I don't like the Nephilim. I don't like stuff like that. Go away.
What is
the Iron Man thing is, if you pull up the 1938 or 39 World's Fair, because he had the airplane named that to fly to advertise pretty much for like the New York World's Fair. And we always talk about this rewrite in history and them using these certain fairs. That poster, that propaganda poster for that plane actually has Iron Man-esque on it. Like it's essentially
cool.
just
a dude. You should show this.
I'm trying to see if I can find this.
Let me see.
Okay, that'd be cool. I love this.
Try like maybe 1939 World's Fair, or
we're having one coming up here. I'm real curious about what's gonna happen.
Me
there.
too. New York World's Fair.
I think they call it that, but I feel like it's not going to live up to what it was once. I don't know if this is it. This is an article about how the New York World's Fair connected to the Marvel universe.
Here's a postcard from it.
Oh, cool. Okay, let's see. Oh, Oh, that is totally Iron Man.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
Rocketing into the future.
Well, this is
Hmm.
Rocketeer, right? It looks just like
Yeah,
Rocketeer.
that too.
And
Wow.
Rocketeer, I assume, was based on like a Howard Hughes type.
That's crazy. Howard Hughes was, he got into the movie business. You know who else was in the movie business at the same time? Papa
Who?
Kennedy. Papa Daddy Kennedy. Joe. Yeah.
Really?
I'm
I didn't
sure
know. I
this.
didn't know he was in Hollywood.
Yep. Yeah. Howard Hughes started making movies, and so did Joe Kennedy. And they seemingly all just kept making so much money when everybody else had their whole life crash around them. And there's a lot of speculation about why that is, but Kennedy's
Well,
came out unscathed.
What's the speculation?
Oh, they talked about, let me pull this up. They talked about how they kind of had a know that this was going to start down with like all the money situation and everything. Let me find it. It was
And
pretty
I feel like
interesting.
out of the three of us, Chaney might also be the expert on like the Hollywood connections to Howard Hughes. Versus, I'm fascinated with the CIA and the jars full of piss stuff. I know Chaney's not as much of a fan of those particular details.
I'm obsessed with the Hollow Earth, the Spruce Goose, and I do get really geeked out, like his relationships in Hollywood. But each one of the women are almost a rabbit hole of their own that it makes my head split. Somewhere, just hearing you guys talking, it seems like this Kennedy Nixon thing was also like a crisscross, that there was potentially, like, we always hear two wings of the same bird. There was potentially two separate mafias that were stepping up to take over the country at the exact same time in history against each other, with Nixon and Kennedy not being a part of the mafia that ends up running later with the Bush, Clinton, Obama, like CIA. It's like the Mormons hearing all this stuff is making me like, holy shit. And then how much stuff they're connected to, not just as president, but other politics. And yeah,
Knowing their
blowing my
part in
mind.
the CIA, it's wild. I have multiple shows on how Permindex goes into this, but I did find what I was speaking about. It's called the Gemstone File. The Gemstone File proposes that Aristotle Onassis and Joe Kennedy and other prominent figures were involved in various schemes to forward a vast global conspiracy involving the mafia and corrupt politicians. So you're not wrong. Brutal oil and drug cartels, rogue military operations, and more. It also posits that early in 1957, Onassis had Howard Hughes kidnapped from the Beverly Hills bungalow. So this apparently at that point, the rest of the story. He was actually kidnapped by a Mormon, James O. Golden, and they were his people, and they turned on him. And apparently he was injured really badly in this kidnapping. And when they took him out to the Bahamas, and that's where he spent the rest of he never recovered from it. So, if you get into Meyer's book, Age of Secrets, that's a book that'll just blow your mind, because then you're like, it's everyone. Like, it's everyone and the Mormons. Like, it's crazy. And his connections, he goes clear back into like all the old CIA, all the old mob ties, how it all fits together, all of it. It's wild. It was a good read.
And it sounds like even without Howard Hughes, the Mormons already had plans for Vegas. They were already going to be profitable from Vegas itself, because Howard Hughes, and maybe you can correct me here, but Howard Hughes sought out Perry because Perry was the guy that you went to if you wanted to buy any buildings, if you wanted to deal anything in Vegas. It wasn't like he went and grabbed the guy and then said, figure out how Vegas works. He went to the guy that was already in the middle of it.
So Perry was a banker even in Utah, and he opened up, the banks here, and they sent him to Vegas. And what happened was they wanted to corporatize it so they could kick the mob out. They were sick of the mob. They were tired of it being like dirty. And Howard Hughes was nothing but not like gentlemanly. He didn't like this whole like on the outside. It was like, keep your business quiet on that, right? Like, don't be putting that all out front. And he wanted to clean up Vegas because he kind of liked it there, including the air. He was really big into like, hey, stop bombing the crap out of here. That's where Meyer came in. He hired John Meyer, and he ended up on like the whole thing for the bombs and the air, and like he had him check out, is this hurting people, and blah blah blah. He was super obsessed with it. He wanted to clean that up. He wanted to clean the streets up. He wanted to like get the mob out. So E. Perry Thomas is put in this position. But I found it so interesting because everybody just says, okay, E. Perry Thomas was this banker. I'm like, yeah, well, in World War II, E. Perry Thomas was a paratrooper skier that worked for Central Intelligence Europe. And so I don't know, like he's CIA all day long. Like they talk about it. And I'm like, okay, why is he a banker now? What happened here? Paratrooper skier CIA guy. Like now you're just some fancy banker. And then he's got all these connections. You got the one with the wins, but he also was super connected to Mariner and George Eccles. And anybody that's a Mormon already knows that name. It's everywhere. Like the Eccles is like a huge deal in Utah. And they said that George Eccles was kind of my dad's godfather, is what his son says about E. Perry Thomas. And he says that they tapped the Teamsters pension funds, and you had to go through him to get anything done after that with corporatizing, because they basically ran the mafia out of town by using the Teamsters to back all the loans. And that way there was no skimming off the top anymore. So then naturally the mob just left. They couldn't skim anymore. It was all loans. So they were like, this is lame. Bye. Like, I'm sure that there was a few that stayed through, but it wasn't big like it was supposed to be. And Mormons were the first ones to settle Vegas anyway. They have the first settlement built there. So it's not like it wasn't theirs to take. I mean, it still stands today.
So there was, we were talking last time about the American primeval and how the Mormons used to be these badass cowboys that were just like rootin' tootin' shooting, right? And then they went through this transition, the skull and bones transition that you pointed out, and they wanted to get into like the CIA and the banking, and that was good on them. But there was still that underlying DNA that some of those Mormons were like, we're going to Vegas and we're taking down the mob, right? Like that's got to be that OG sort of like Brighamite blood, no?
I think it's more Joseph in that kind of blood. Brigham was pretty bad too. But what I do say about Brigham was, under Brigham, there was a reformation of the church. Really, there's a reformation that happened, and they all had to be rebaptized, everything. There's a full reformation of the LDS church under Brigham. And so when this happens, I think Brigham is really trying to, towards the end, not in the middle, he's trying to clean it up a little, right? Like, because they're having all these problems and they're fighting the military. They just don't want to lose their temple again, man. They're just sick of it. And so at some point, the next one, George A. Smith, is where this really gets important. And he is Joseph Smith's bloodline. And he ends up on the cover of Time magazine. And I think this was a nod to them to say, we're playing ball, because George A. Smith also was a Rotarian, which doesn't make any sense for him to be a Mormon and a Rotarian. That doesn't really go together. And he also was in like secret societies, and he was very college, and he was a banker. And he was the first one that kind of pulled that. And what they did is they used their women to make all their deposits into this bank, to start this bank. And then they started backing wars. And that's how you get power, man. I mean, like, it was all over but the crying then. And then now when I refer to the Mormon church, I just barely talked to this couple that's still really in the church. And I'm like, listen, I'm not talking about the LDS church as you love. I'm talking about LDS Inc., like the church that became a corporation basically and runs shit now. Like, it's different. And it's been completely taken over. It's completely like all CIA bankers now, basically. So, yeah. George A. Smith, check out that Time magazine cover. That's when it changed.
If you're a Mormon, CIA, Vegas mobster, which of those wins? I assume Mormon always floats to the top, right? Because that starts when you're a kid.
I don't think you would. I mean, like, maybe a mobster might fold, but a Mormon wouldn't. Like, I mean, a Mormon's never gonna fold. Like, usually, I mean, I won't say never, We're pretty brainwashed. I mean,
Like, I'm not giving up my planet for you. Like, I got a planet waiting for me.
yeah, unless they're under 8, I don't think they have a hard time killing anybody, because a lot of them had the second anointing back then, so they just didn't care. They're going to heaven unless they kill innocent blood. So if you're not innocent, they could give a crap less. If you're under the age of 8.
I want that second anointing so bad. That would be so awesome.
You need to be married. You can't get it. A woman has to steal your wife. Your wife has to seal that upon your head, which is why I believe they're ultimately worshiping a female deity, but whatever.
Oh, we got a super chat. I got to call it out. Crossover with Occult Disney. Could you cover Don Bluth related to the Pratt family, early LDS founders? I had no idea that Don Bluth had anything to do with Mormons. Mormons got their fingers in everything.
Well, Werner von Braun was in one of their movies.
Heidi, you're formally invited onto Occult Disney. We might do like a Don Bluth month special, and we can come on and talk about Mormonisms and the Land Before Time.
We should actually also talk about the Disney connection with the Mormons, Walt Disney himself.
We should totally watch the cartoon too, the Mormon cartoon that everyone talks about. That would be a perfect time to do that.
That's a good one. Oh boy.
Oh my gosh, just looking at Don Bluth, like the things he's specifically been involved in, I'd be like, how many of these are like hidden Mormon messages? And it's like All Dogs Go to Heaven and An American Tale, The Land Before Time.
Yep. Oh, I think you're onto something
curious.
there. Well, when I was looking down the rabbit hole, Mormons are obsessed with space. We've done one on space before. And I just found it super curious as I was digging through all this, that I found that theological movie Werner von Braun was in up for the Mormons. Nobody else was allowed, only Mormons. And then boop, Werner von Braun. I'm like, oh my gosh, not another rabbit hole. It's just like Masonry. I mean, I know they're Masons, but I'm just saying it's worse than Masonry. I can't even keep it. Like, you guys have charts.
and a rapidly declining membership versus Mormons, which is the opposite.
Well, that's because it just hides it better, and they are so nice.
And they have so much money. You got so much money if you're a Mormon. Well, not, I mean, individually, but just like as the Mormon Church as a whole has got way more money than Masons do. I think
Jacob will definitely disagree with that.
Oh my God, here he is to do it in person.
Yay, Jacob!
What am I disagreeing with, and who do I get a fight with?
I told you. I said Jacob would disagree with that comment, and you popped in and said that. That's hilarious.
I missed the comment.
Me too. I was the one that said it, but I missed it.
He said that if you're in the Mormon Church, you're so rich. And I said, well, I don't know if that's for everything.
Well, I meant like, if you are the Mormon Church, you are so rich. Maybe not if you are in it, but if you are the church itself. And this is in relation to, like, we were asking before, Howard Hughes or the Mormon Church, who do you think had the most money in the 60s?
Oh, if it's in the 60s, it's probably Howard Hughes. It was in the days of Gordon B. Hinckley that the wealth finally became numbered in the billions in a short amount of time, and it has steadily climbed in that direction. In the 1960s, Howard Hughes all the way.
Hey, now, Jacob.
How much of that do you got, Jacob? How many of those bills?
I've probably made dozens of dollars off of a church-related sort of
dozens.
Definitely in the dozens.
Hey, Jacob, let him know what Gordon B. Hinckley did for a living.
What he did for a living? Oh, he worked for the church. You'll have to remind me. What is this living that he did? He became a de facto first member. And if you see me wrapping wires around my face, it's because the microphone is on here, and if I leave it at my side, it gets tucked underneath the beard and it sounds so muffled. So just deal with it.
Hinckley was one of the first that ended up at Washington, D.C. He was in the Department of Agriculture.
Right.
Yes.
No. You are thinking. Here's where you got it wrong. Ezra Taft Benson.
He
was named by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Secretary of Agriculture.
You're muffled.
Adjust your.
There you go.
Your thing.
How about now?
There.
How we doing? It was
good.
Taft Benson.
It's dead now again.
All right, let's try this. Let's try this. Hopefully, we're doing all right.
Way
What do you
better.
think? What do you think?
Way
How am I
better.
sounding?
That's way better.
Way
Way
better.
better.
Is this sounding all right? Maybe the microphone's
yeah.
on this side. So it was Ezra Taft Benson who was tapped by. I don't know what to do.
You're good.
He was tapped
No,
by
that's
Dwight D. Eisenhower to be the Secretary of Agriculture. And against his own advice, Ezra Taft Benson advised to President Eisenhower, he gave a tour to Nikita Khrushchev of the United States to show the communist Russians something about American agriculture, which was top in the world at the time. And he relates the story of how Nikita Khrushchev told Ezra Taft Benson, your grandchildren will live under communism. No, my grandchildren will live under freedom. Oh, they will not accept communism at first, but we will give it to them bit by bit until one day they wake up and they are communist. So
yep. Hegelian dialectic, right? There.
Yes, he gave the little by little, but Ezra Taft Benson is the last that I know who was a member of the Quorum of the 12, actively raising the alarm regarding secret combinations in general, communism being top among them. Since then, it is all's well in Zion. Don't look behind the curtain because you might find us there as well.
Don't look in the CIA documents. That's for sure.
No.
Yeah, no, he's not wrong. Yeah, it gets interesting. It gets very interesting. Like me and Jacob have agreed in the past, Joseph's church is not Brigham's church. So, yeah.
That's definitely for sure. And for people who are looking at it, what do the LDS people do in the temple? It is just a fraction of what it used to be. People should study what was this endowment ceremony like in the days of Brigham as opposed to what it is now, because it's being turned quickly into more fast food type servings and ordinances being done there. Look it up in the days of Brigham.
That scared people. They did the blood oaths and that scared people off, I think. A lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about Vegas a little bit here too, with the Howard Hughes connection and the Mormon Mafia that kind of enabled a lot of Howard Hughes. And I'm curious, your denomination, Jacob, are you okay to touch dice? Are you allowed to touch dice?
There's nothing that restricts me. Some of the things that there we go. Let's see if that looks any better. There's nothing that I know of. I never got told you're not allowed to play dice or games of chance. I know that in the early chapters of the Book of Mormon, part of the Jewish tradition is to cast lots. That was the way that they picked the apostle that was going to fill the ranks after Judas killed himself. It was also the way that Nephi and his brothers chose who was going to go talk to Laban. They would cast lots. The tradition was, whether it was from God or not, is if you leave it to chance, that gives God a chance that allows God to intervene and shows who he would like to do any given task. Cast lots. So I guess rolling the dice might be along those same lines.
Okay, so there's some leeway there.
They don't, but the church refuses to accept any tithing on any of the earnings from gambling. They're very steadfast in that. So.
Well, you just gotta launder it through one way or another. It's like,
well, sure.
Well, let's just now put it through the shell company, and it's so good now.
That's what's up. Yeah, with the Sumo Corporation. That's
one
right
of the
there.
videos that I was watching. It was like oriented towards Mormons and describing, and their explanation sounded BS to me, but. To summarize it was that Mormons don't believe in taking money from anyone unless they're getting some kind of value in return, and that gambling violates that particular tenet.
I would say that's very much a value with which I was raised. One of the stories that I love about my Idaho grandpa on my mom's side is my Idaho great grandpa on my mom's side is that in between jobs, he would run from this house to the next to make it there on time because he knew that he was charging people by the hour, and he wanted to make sure that he never shirks his duties in providing a service for which they will pay. It is a value that I wish were still encouraged more.
Right, does this mean Mormons aren't allowed to play with meme coins?
There's no restrictions on that. Anything that's going to be generating tithing dollars one way or another, it's pretty much welcomed. You can do whatever you want. If you're selling pornography and alcohol at all of the Marriott Resort hotels, you might have to just whitewash it a little bit before it goes to LDS corporate funds. But no, they do not want to restrict that in any way.
If we're doing that overseas and you happen to be one of the biggest Mormon families that we know of, we want to make sure the Armenian hotels do that for you. Wash that money. Anyways,
Can you get to like somebody's theoretically in the idea of Mormonism? Could I get to your planet by a rocket?
Oh, you're referring to Kolob? I do not know where it takes place. I know that, especially towards the end of Joseph Smith's life, there was a lot more talk of and even publications on Kolob. It's only described as the star system closest to where God resides. I don't know of any interplay. I doubt it. Maybe if the theoretical Star Trek were a reality, maybe they could travel to it, but I'm unaware of it.
Yeah.
we would want our own.
The way that it's the little bit that is described in the book of Abraham, it refers to the revolutions of time. The passage of time in that location is very different than it's measured unto us earth people.
Does Brigham Young have was there any concept of like black holes or other space philosophy, or was it just like the planet idea?
Moon people that looked like Quakers. You could even do that. So there's a number of different options for looking up the Brigham Young Journal of Discourses and doing a Control F search. Among the words that are fun, you can just type in the word moon and you'll get at least one quote where he says there's people who live on the moon that look a lot like Quakers. I don't know what he was speculating that
That
upon.
was Joseph. Yeah, that was Joseph.
I think
Brigham's
if I remember,
son.
I'll have to look it up and just see if you can find it. I think it might have been Brigham saying, and I learned from Joseph.
Well, okay, so here's what the internet says, and we know the internet would never lie or be wrong about anything.
And just before you do that, good sir, Mr. Paranoid American, be sure to click on the blue links, because over and over again, there's Joseph Smith said this, and the original source is somebody claiming it and attributing it to Joseph years after his death.
This one beats you to the punch a little bit. It says that here's a Q&A. Question: did Joseph Smith teach that men who look like Quakers lived on the moon? And the answer is possibly. The only source for this comes from a guy named Oliver Huntington, who said in 1881 that he heard it from someone named Philo Dibble, who apparently recalled this from 40 years earlier. So it's a little bit of a game of telephone, like my friend's grandpa said. But
and how big was the fish again, Grandpa? Was it this big? Was it this? Now,
But if you know anything about the esoteric teachings, it doesn't sound crazy. If you know about the Golden Dawn teachings, I hate that they kind of make them seem nuts. But Brigham said sun people, he said moon people, whatever. It really does come up again and again in the teachings of the Golden Dawn. So.
And if you kind of think of the idea of they look like Quakers. Well, what do we think of with the Quaker? They usually show the Quaker man. If you look into all the oldest ancient depictions, we see everyone with a halo behind them. That if we were looking at the silhouette of something, our explanation might be they had a Quaker hat on.
And I typically don't trust the Quakers just because the Quaker Oats man does not have a beard.
I mean, I definitely think that Joseph was more than, he was hailed as a master of things, even written about by Crowley, and in the Moonchild book. I do think he figured out some magical things. I think he wasn't dumb, and I do think he must have had some somewhere exposed. I'm assuming Lumen Walters exposed him to some of the mystery school stuff. I mean, so if you learn about it, at first when I read it, I'm like, ha, they're crazy. But then when you start reading about stuff, you're like, okay, this is why they said this, right? So, I mean, I don't know.
Are they off limits? Are you allowed to say read John Dee and be into John Dee as a Mormon?
No, not really.
LDS in general, and it's interesting how that term Mormon is changing so much, because I consider myself a Mormon, but I'm not LDS, even though I was
You're
raised
one of the
LDS.
good ones. Let's be clear, everyone. He's one of the good ones.
The term is very much changing. I'll say this: LDS culture in general discourages from searching for godly knowledge outside of approved sources.
Can't even do astrology. Even though Joseph loved astrology, even though the Big Dipper's on every single temple, you tell me that, what?
Well, and I think about
all the
this,
good stuff away.
I've got some fun Mormon amigos in a similar sort of a spiritual camp as myself, rather independent, and they do astrology, they do star readings, and as I contemplate trying to get inspiration from the Almighty on how I should view these things, I realize, well, we don't believe in the slightest that Satan and his minions had any control over the creation of anything, let alone the stars. So God put it in orbit. We definitely know that people saw signs in the heavens in the Old Testament days, New Testament days. If it was put into place by the Almighty, we might, by the power of the Almighty, interpret and understand things happening in the heavens and how they reflect in things happening on earth.
I think it's silly that they took away all the things of old, because I mean, I'm not saying for me, okay, because I'm not a practicing Mormon anymore, but for them to be scrubbing moonstones, cloud stones, big dippers, all these things that they found were very important to them back in the day, I don't think they should be getting rid of it. I think it's bad.
It would have been smart for, I would say, LDS Inc. to fully embrace that during like the 60s and 70s. Then they can back away, but now it's back in vogue again, right? If the Mormon, if LDS
they would take
Inc.
it back on,
what sign are you? Come to temple.
Find out what sign you are.
The big concern is when people start to show spiritual gifts, whether they're from God or whether somebody's being deceived. When people show spiritual gifts and they're not a part of the leadership hierarchy, it undermines the perception of we've got a monopoly on what you're allowed to believe and do.
And Jacob, why is the whole residential area for LDS Inc.? I'm going to call them LDS Inc. when I'm not talking about the LDS, okay? LDS Inc. made their own community and called it Mount Olympus. They are passing down everything through their people only, through their, it's like a big mafia thing now. I mean, that's what it is. So, yeah. That tells
Mount
what
Olympus.
they think of. Oh, that tells you what they think of themselves. That's why I bring it up, because they're gods, right? It's not, we're not talking about gods like Joseph thought. We're talking about people that have taken something and turned it into something else. That's all. I mean,
this is maybe a dumb question, but I don't want to make any assumptions here. When the Mormons build a large temple, these golden temples, is it the same? Like I was taught growing up that usually Roman Catholics, they build it grandiose as like an honor to God, and that they're trying to show that they're trying to impress God. Is it the same thing in Mormon temples?
You'll probably get some images really quick if you do an image search. New temple open house, those are probably words that are going to get you some of the best. There's going to be commonalities among pretty much all of them. At the bottom part of each of the LDS temples, there is a baptistry, and it'll be a large, beautiful font built on the top of 12 oxen representing the 12 tribes of Israel. There's going to be at least one room that is considered an endowment room. It's going to be a place where people go in and sit down, watch partially visually, and hear audio and start to participate in the rituals depicting the creation of the world, the fall of Adam and Eve, from the Garden of Eden to their lost and fallen state, and the steps to return back to the presence of God. There's also going to be another room with an altar that's used for sealings, to where individuals and families might have blessings placed upon them by which their family relationships will endure beyond death in this life. Those are the commonalities.
Cinemas built into the temples. They've got, and now I saw someone uploaded the entire endowment ritual. Like the old guy comes out and he talks, and then
your name Noah. Noah.
It'll depend on which year it is, because my parents went through a type of endowment which had a whole lot more inside of it. There was additional characters, and among the things that are the most shocking to today's sensibilities is they would act out the slitting of their own throat, the cutting out of their own hearts, and the spilling of their own bowels. There would also be men on the other side of a sheet at the end of the ceremony, and women would embrace them by the hand and by the shoulder, and have certain passwords that would have to be remembered and repeated back. I've heard stories from multiple different sources that was changed in the 1990s because of too many reports of old men on the other side who are still getting their mojo rising, and somebody there might be a little bit of pokage going on.
What?
To be breast to breast. Think of masonry, breast to breast. It was the 5 points of fellowship, to where it was a physical embrace at the end, by which you're at least close enough to where your mouth would be close to somebody's ear as you give some instructions that would be repeated back to you. So death penalties, oath of vengeance, and other things have been taken out since the early 90s. Well, Beverly Bruff.
I don't want to gloss over the pokage.
What I meant by that is there was reports of, during this embrace between the person representing the Lord on the other side of the sheet/veil, women would feel an erect penis through the person's hand.
Oh, okay.
Through the person's pants.
So the 5 points of fellowship would also be a male
6 points.
No,
temple
that was extracurricular.
Okay.
It wasn't supposed to happen. And Beverly Bruff Campbell had a big part to those changes in the temple ceremony, and she was very close. They oftentimes call her the 13th apostle because she had so much pull. Yeah.
I'm going to give you even more than that. So this is having heard this from the person directly. His name is True Ott. He has put out a book, TRU, last name OTT. He lives in Ogden area. I've spent a number of hours with him, and these are things that he talked about in his book. In the 80s, there was more reports that when this acting out of certain death penalties, and there would be this symbol, your thumb going across your throat, indicating the slashing, people would have anxiety attacks and panic attacks. True Ott had a radio program at the time and was starting to he talked about what happened to his own friend, how she had an episode like that when that sign was made at the bowling alley that he owned where he was working, talking with the husband, what's going on here? She was programmed and had ritualistic abuse. She was raised with it. He ended up supplying more than 30 of the interviews later done by Bishop Glenn L. Pace, as that presiding bishop was investigating reports of satanic ritual abuse happening in the LDS church. So at that time, when it was becoming more and more understood among the leadership, there's panic attacks happening in our temple, and it's possibly associated, maybe they even knew about it, and it's possibly associated with ritualistic programming and abuse that people are suffering. It was taken out in 1991.
Yes, and I do think possibly Under the Banner of Heaven situation helped get that kicked out too, because they did take out a blood atonement on this lady, not sanctioned by the church or anything. These people just went off on their own on a wild spree, and I've actually sat down and talked to the surviving husband of this whole situation, and it's really sad. But they did blood atone her by almost chopping off her daughter's head and almost decapitated her and slitting her throat as well for disobedience to her husband. So I do think at that time, like Jacob's saying, we've got the Pace papers coming out, we've got this coming out, we've got all this stuff coming out. I think the church was just like, stop it. And you know what's funny is the Mormons set the tone, but the Masons followed within 6 months as a whole on the organization. So some of your changes came from that as well. You know,
I know there's a tendency to pull back things once they're too out in the open, and it's not because they've ever repented of such things. It has to do with, we need to pull back until we gain a certain level of control over the information.
Yeah, I think it was just a lot and you know, the prophet of the church's daughter was one of the ones implicated in the Pace papers, so it was messy. You know, I mean, I think they were just like, clean it up, folks. Like, what is happening here? And you're always going to have rogue people. It's just like government. It's just like anything. I mean, we can't control everybody all the time. So, yeah. Whoop, Jacob's there.
He was going.
There we go. That's funny. I thought he was going to go around the car and do a dance, but
should I drink a beer or an energy drink? Either way, the conversation will improve, at least on my part.
That's funny.
Do they get the water like from anywhere special for the Mormon temple? Do they baptize it, or do they have to draw it from a spring? Or
I don't think there's any. It's probably. I suspect it's just for whatever's there. Having participated in those baptisms many times, you can smell the light amount of chlorine as they keep it in pristine condition and clean condition for people to go under.
Okay,
but I don't think there's anything specific about the water supply.
They don't say a prayer over it, or they're like, it has to be drawn from this place on a Tuesday, full moon, or something.
My experience in LDS culture, so at least modern LDS culture, it doesn't have any emphasis on things like holy water or other things. It might have been more so in the days of Joseph Smith, but certainly not in modern LDS experience.
Joseph's baptism did have a very cool place where he got baptized, because he got baptized in the Susquehanna River. And if you've ever done a deep dive on Susquehanna, it gets wild up in there. So there's a lot of magical stuff. Yeah.
Writing it down. I was
Yeah,
going to
it's
tell you too, just randomly, because you said the gay family, and there's two
Here's the
people on
name.
Real Housewives of Salt Lake
It's
City
her.
that are
It's his wife.
related to those
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, that's his wife. That's okay. So the guy we were talking about, son's wife. Yes, Heather Gay. Yep. She literally states that her family is Mormon royalty, but she is talking about LDS Inc. We're back to LDS
Okay.
Inc. here when we're talking about the gays. And I like to separate it out just for the simple fact that there are a lot of people like Jacob and a lot of people that I talk to, and I kind of got a lot of heat from this on my last interview. I went on MBR and spoke to these people that wanted to be in church, and LDS Inc. had kicked them out of the church. And I was like, this is wild. And I just felt like it wasn't fair that they should be kicked out if they want to be there. If I don't want to be there, I don't have to be there. If Jacob wants to not be there in the way they make it, he doesn't have to do that. I don't think people that want to be there shouldn't be kept from being there. And I said, I never thought I'd advocate for anyone to go back to church at the Mormon church, but there I was, because I feel like constitutional rights are important, and I kind of got a lot of slack for that being an ex-mo, but
And all roads lead back to Real Housewives somehow, right? Because I had to Google Heather Gay, and she's the one that wrote Bad Mormon book.
Wait until
about being the next Mormon, right?
Those Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Go
Based
look up
off of
her.
based off of that one and only picture. I think this is the first picture I've ever seen with her. Who believes that she has work done? Is there enhancement that's been done to that face by a professional?
Now is that
God.
anti-Mormon? Are Mormons allowed to?
No, they can do that. Every girl has.
There's only personal sentiments. My own personal sentiment is as close to the way that God made us, take as good care of us as possible. I'm all for get good nutrition and go work out and take care of yourself. But when it comes to artificially changing your body, I don't know. I got 0 tattoos and I got 0 piercings, but Heidi, if you help me pick a good one, maybe you can come with me and we'll do an episode about my first ever tattoo.
All right. I got a lot of tattoos.
A beehive.
Oh, wait. What about the sigil of Mammon? Because it's exactly the same. It's the same for the Melchizedek priesthood.
The bloodstone amulet design.
Possibly. If I do get one, it's probably going to be 3rd Nephi chapter 5, verse 13. Behold, I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. I have been called of God to declare his word among his people, that they might have everlasting life. That might be it somewhere. Maybe I'll get it on the inside of my forearm, or maybe I'll get it on the side of my noggin.
Jacob, what about right here? It looks pretty cool right here. Or like on your back or your shoulder.
I know, but I don't have really good cleavage to show off if I started to show the tattoo. So,
what about the shoulder? Do the shoulder. Yeah.
You know what? If I were to get that, since it would be just a straight up text one, probably with a really good font, it's likely to be on the inside of my left forearm.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I have to tell you guys also, when you bring up people like this, everything is staged. The whole world is a stage. And Crowley also wasn't wrong about everybody getting their own star later, especially with the associated issues there with LDS Inc. I won't throw the whole church under the bus with that, but I will say this. All the things you guys see online that are put in place, like, the wives, secret lives of Mormon wives, look at their families. Their families are like very, very serious players in the Mormon church too. No one's there on accident. No one. So, I mean, they are part, why wouldn't they be a part of Hollywood? Right. They're players. Yeah.
There's a concept that I at least want to make sure your audience is familiar with. If you would look up, Thomas, Mormon Monarch. It's a blog, and I think it's mormonmonarch.com. His name is J.R. Sweet. I spent a few hours talking with him about 2 years ago. He details what he claims is him being raised in the CIA military wing of the LDS secret combinations.
Oh wow, yeah. Read the top of the blog.
This gets wild. Yeah.
It says, Mormon Monarch, I am a survivor of the CIA's trauma-based mind control program, MK Ultra, and a CIA sleeper assassin who is now awake. I am blowing the wind.
There are a lot of
his writings are beyond what you could think somebody would imagine on their own. But the concept that I at least want to bring up, because he's the one that helped me understand this. Those who are evil, who are trying to control the masses, they view themselves on the left-hand path, and those who are trying to do good. For example, I automatically assume if people are tuning into a podcast like this or participating in a podcast like this, generally speaking,
if somebody calls us up saying, hey, I really need your help, we'd be willing to give of ourselves. We feel bad if somebody gets hurt. We're not looking to take advantage of others in our business dealings. We're described as those who are on the right-hand path. The left-hand path is those who are deliberately deceiving, trying to appear as godly in their earthly walk as possible for the purpose of subverting people's works, what people do in life, to gain control over them. Nobody is going to get the majority of Mormons, or even a small fraction of the Mormons, to knowingly engage in things they know to be evil. So those, the left-hand path, they seek for control over policies, influence, and resources, so they can say, well, God has given us this godsend of a vaccine, or whatever it may be. Hopefully that wasn't a word you have to bleep out. But they're trying to gain control over the masses by being perceived as godly. That's the left-hand path, trying to control the vast majority that are on the right-hand path, trying to do the best that God wants us to do as best we can.
Absolutely. And there's a whole episode. I did a few episodes with somebody really knowledgeable in the whole breakdown of the CIA and the Pace Papers. Episode 105 and 120 will help you guys get diagram. He brings diagrams and the whole thing, not about the monarch situation, but about the infiltration with the Pace Papers and everything. So, but I agree.
Let me just say, I saw that comment from Paula D to where the whole church is left hand. I'll just say from my experience, the vast majority, by and far, are trying to do the best that they can on behalf of others. There is controlling cult-like practices, especially when it's outside information, outside ideas. But my whole experience among Latter-day Saints, they are among the most inviting people that I've ever met. They do become insecure when their doctrines and beliefs are challenged. But I wouldn't describe the hundreds, if not thousands, that I've known over the course of my life as being left-hand path, at least not knowingly.
And most of them are unknowing.
Religion.
I wanted to say, to Jacob's point, if they are doing left-hand path process, they don't know. They don't know, and it's being harnessed by people that do know, and they are leading people in a certain direction, and that is not okay with me. And that's why I separate the LDS Church from LDS Inc., because all of my family, all of my posterity, everything that I am, was Mormon. My family was handcart Mormon. My family, you can't just throw out everybody. But I do think there were some very influential people that took this and ran.
It's worth clarifying too. Now we got Jacob in the mix. I don't want to flippantly just throw around the Mormon word. I guess in my head, every time I'm like, are the Mormons allowed to do X? I'm thinking if I'm about to go into temple and I got, like a Mormon verse tattooed on my forehead, am I allowed in temple? That's what I mean when I say do Mormons allow
I'll say it is definitely allowed now. One of the times that I still remember, even though I don't remember the person's name, there was a guy who had really obvious gang tattoos on his body, including on his face. And there was such a feeling of gratitude as he was there in the temple going through for the first time. I at least recognized that as part of him trying to get right with God and trying to leave behind a past life that he knew was bringing pain and suffering to himself and others. So I don't know what it's like in the past, but I've seen people with tattoos on their face being welcomed in quite lovingly into an LDS temple.
So I had a tattoo and I got told this. Okay, did you get it before you became a knowing member? I did. Did you get more afterward? I didn't at that time because I was a believer. And they kind of go over it like, what is it? Is it Satan upside down? It wasn't. It was like a flower, They were like, eh. And so it's an individual basis, but now they have changed the rules and it is not anymore. Just like the coffee thing, they're changing a lot of rules. And I suspect, I don't know how Jacob feels about this in the mainstream anyway. I think we're going to see some crazy acceptance into the Mormon Church with a lot of changes coming our way. Yeah.
Well, because I post LDS Mormon related stuff, my social media feed is filled with advertisements saying, come and join our Christian-based community. And you wouldn't know that it's LDS from the advertisement. That's all over. It's very obvious they're trying to change the perception as opposed to the one and only church. We have more to offer. Have you heard about the Book of Mormon? Now it's, we're one of you, just like the rest of the Christians. Right. We've got a lot to offer. That perception has been going, those kind of advertisements have been going on for the past few years.
Well, and just barely about a year ago, my husband said, hey, I went on there. I was looking for this church. And now the Mormon churches all have crosses where they used to have Moroni, the statue. And now, and so many people noticed and threw a big, huge fit. They changed it back because they were like, that's not right. Mormons don't believe in crosses. They don't like crosses. I mean, they wouldn't have that as a representation of their church typically. And so they did turn it back because people were really not happy with that one. The Mormons too, because they were like, what are you doing?
Jacob was saying earlier that there was people talking about satanic ritual abuse in the Mormon church. Was it Mormons talking about it? And if
it
there
got ugly.
Some kind of ritual abuse, is there a Mormon version of like an exorcism?
Yeah, not so much. So I've been about as active raised LDS as you're ever going to find, having been just my come to Jesus moment at 15, fireball missionary, just active my whole life until they kicked me out. There's very little understood regarding the casting out of evil spirits. Right now, I am reading with my little children the book of Matthew, and there's quite a lot of examples of Jesus casting out evil spirits. What I ended up reading with my little kids, a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 11-year-old, and they remember the story because it's quite dramatic. When Jesus crosses the ocean, calms the winds, when he shows up on the other side, there's 2 men possessed with demons, and they are scary. Nobody dares pass by there. And when Jesus shows up, they call out, "Thou son of David," that prophetic calling from the Old Testament. "Have you come to torment us before the time? If you cast us out of this man that they're tormenting, these men that they're tormenting, allow us to go into the herd of swine." And Jesus says, "Go." And they enter the herd of swine, and these 2,000 plus pigs ran violently off a cliff and killed themselves. So there's some major drama associated with casting out these evil entities that have taken root inside of people's bodies. I know of it from having interviewed many of these people, as well as just hearing people's personal experiences. There's times when people recognize spiritual attachments, but it never manifests in some sort of spirit taking over. On more rare occasions, people have to be delivered from a spiritual attachment that takes over the vocal cords and the mental processes and everything.
Strongholds. They'll call them strongholds in the church, but I mean, they're not without, even though they have destroyed much of the woo-woo, as Thomas likes to call it, right? Like the whoa, cool stuff. Thomas was like, you guys took everything good out, right? They still have some things that are, but, by and far, they have changed so much. And I do think, a lot of it is like, hide that Joseph ever read the book of Enoch. He clearly did. He had the Order of Enoch. Like there was all this stuff. He was getting very woo-woo. And I think they didn't like that. Brigham tightened that up. Brigham had, the whole Reformation, which is why me and Jacob can agree on many things that, Brigham's church is not Joseph's.
Yeah. It seems silly. And but holy water, no. Crosses, no. How would Mormons kill a vampire?
With the priesthood.
Now, what I was told, having never experienced it myself, pretty much because as a young 19 or 20-year-old missionary, because I was given the priesthood, I could raise my arm to the square and by the power of that priesthood and in the name of Jesus, use any authority that was necessary. That was at least in my mind. Now, I did an interview on my channel. I do a channel called Disciple of Christ. His name is Eric Samuels. It's a 3-part interview. It's cumulatively about 6 hours of interviews. In the 3rd part, he gets in depth about the exorcism that happened to him. He became a Luciferian in his teenage years, really details a lot that happened. He escaped from Luciferianism as he was being prepped for human sacrifice. And it was a few years after that, he had an exorcism, and his family has to tell him what happens because he has zero recollection. His mom says this handsome, tall, muscular 20-something-year-old, I think he was in his late 20s, early 30s at the time, eyes became black, different voice, and his mom realizes, this isn't my son anymore. And it was an hour-plus process before this entity was cast out, and the family described when finally this entity who went by the name Belial was cast out, they said it sounded like every dog within a 1-mile radius just went berserk.
The Belial group, that is bananas for what I've been studying, just FYI. The Belial group, you guys can Google it. It's too big of a convo for right now, but yeah.
put it on my
What?
list.
On the vampire thing too, this came up before, but Mormons seem like they would be kindred. Mormon Inc. Jacob, don't get crazy.
Yes, Mormon Inc.
But it seems that they would be sort of very accepting of vampires. They're white and delightsome. They want to live forever. They share so many things in common. No.
Stephanie Myers likes them. She's a Mormon.
Well, even like the idea that you would get it kind of anointed with the power that you could almost bless anything to use. That what's that movie with George Clooney and him and his brother pick up the priest. I think it's a Quentin Tarantino
brother,
movie.
where art thou?
They
No,
don't.
the vampire one with Quentin.
I wanted to
Tarantino.
tell you they don't
From Dusk
use
Till Dawn?
Yes, that
That's
the
the
preacher
one.
kind of seems like he could be a Mormon preacher then, because he's kind of anointed with the power. He walks away from it for a certain amount of time.
He would use anointed oil. They do use anointed oil.
But they go to a bar that turns into a strip club.
Well, and I see such a transition to where the frontier days in Brigham Young's days, there was long-bearded radicals and there was a lot of independence, distrust of the government. The type of LDS Mormonism that I was raised in, Mitt Romney is probably the clearest archetype of what you might aspire to as a male regarding respect in the church and respect in the community.
Oh, until you look at what he was doing with Robert Gay at the little microloans. But I mean, it gets interesting. I think that anybody can be corrupted. And I mean, it's sad because you start looking into things and then you go, oh, him too. And it's all about money at that point. I mean, I don't know where he sits at this point, so I don't want to judge him, but he had some strange dealings with Bill Gay's son, Robert, who also was then retired from the Quorum of the 70 for these dealings at Bain and Company. So if you guys want to check that out, but all of them that get high up, it's like absolute power corrupts absolutely every single time. And it's sad because I mean, like I can feel for my relatives or anybody else that's still in it and a true blue Mormon, a TBM, like a believer of the things that they're taught, right? But not this other stuff that's behind it that they don't even know about. They don't even know. I mentioned something about the prophet being a Skull and Bones member to these people, and they were like, what's that? They didn't even know what it was. So, I mean, they're hiding everything,
Is there a connection at all with, we were talking about Vegas and then Salt Lake City. Is there a Chicago connection huge with the Mormons?
It's
like we were talking about the mob and picking presidents. And it's like, if we're going to tie all these keys together, what's the Chicago stronghold?
So the whole thing came through Mayhew. Robert Mayhew is the connect for the mafia, and he was very in with Giancana, and Giancana is really in with another one, and they all worked together. They were all together. This was all a big piece of the pie. You're not wrong. Yeah.
It's so funny because Sam Giancana was on my list specifically of like, if the Mormons are into part of the development of Vegas, then that dude specifically has to be all mixed in. And then once you get into the Kennedy election, which we were talking about with Nixon, the Kennedy doesn't get voted in at all without Sam's help. And so then Sam also comes around later on for the Kennedy assassination, that his name and all his mafia members are all tied in it as well. So
you need to look at something called Permindex. You need to look at Permindex, and it goes, I promise you, when JFK papers are released, this is all going to make a lot of sense. And I've released about 4 episodes called CIA Church and all this stuff and aliens. All this goes to like all of these connections that you're talking about. And they go through Bob Bennett. They go through all of these things. And I'm telling you guys, it is quite an interesting
Basel,
ride.
which Basel, Switzerland, I might be wrong, but that's the Bank of International Settlements, which it's like anything that is some form of reparation has to go through this arm. From
let me tell you who's on the board of Permindex, Roy Cohn. So I cannot believe that Trump is actually going to put those papers out, because Roy Cohn is his mentor basically from youth. And now when all this comes out, I'm telling you, Clay Shaw was also on the board. All these Mussolini people were on the board. The board is wild. I mean, honestly, when you start looking into this is where my mind got blown. And then I ended up at aliens and I was like, what the hell is happening? And so, Oswald, George de Mohrenschildt, all of it, clear to RFK's assassination. It's all dirty Mormons. I'm going to say dirty or ink or whatever, because it's not the same church. It's not the Church of Christ. Like that's a different thing. Joseph started the Church of Christ, right? So I don't know. It got weird. It gets real weird. And now we all know, if you look at anything from, here in Jacob can tell to the CIA is here, FBI is here, NSA is here, IRS is here, Air Force Base is here, all within a couple hours of us,
Almost like it was planned for the split of the country, like a whole separate DC or something.
Wait till you see the vault where they keep their genealogy in the side of a mountain like Fort Knox. Yeah, Jacob.
I recently found out too that there was one of the last remaining alchemical labs, like an actual modern alchemical lab, was also based in Salt Lake City until like the late 90s when they ended up moving to Australia. It was called the Paracelsian Lab, I think.
Yeah. Huh. You know what? I talked to somebody that knows this weird story about and it came up randomly, not me. And they were like, there's these arrows. And if you know how to read alchemical symbols and blah, 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 and it tells you how to get to some place in underground. I was like, what? It was
we're going on a treasure hunt. There's
I told you. Yeah, you come on.
And also, since Jacob brought up the Romney family, and since we're talking about Mormon Mafia, this was one of my first introductions to the cool side of Mormon Inc. And cool, I guess, with an asterisk, but there's this Vice documentary, I know, roll your eyes, but 12 years ago, and it's called The Mexican Mormon War, Drug Cartels versus the Mormons, and it's basically how Mitt Romney's Mexican side of his family that moved, and they wanted to just like run
the polygamist fundamentalists.
Yes, they're not part of the mainstream, or they're not Inc. or the other one. They're another one.
No, if Romney came into power, if he got voted as president, would they have some kind of political capital, or is he far removed from them?
On the surface, they keep as far removed as possible with the polygamist fundamentalist Mormons. But it is common to where anytime there's money and resources moving around, there's business connections behind the scenes. But the LDS official keeps themselves as distant as possible from Mormon polygamist fundamentalists.
I will say
have
this.
A certain sect name?
Oh, FLDS usually.
That's
FLDS.
The Mexican
FLDS
cartel Romneys.
Yeah, and even those have their different factions. There's names like LeBaron, among others, that are the different family names, and they have their own history. They have their own history of all the time. It'll be like, here's spiritual gifts. Here's a time where it seems like peaceful and prosperity, and then people start killing each other for power and control over the community.
And then when you get into like some of the other groups, like I've mentioned today, when we talk about that, they don't all agree the same. Like they think they're literally the bloodline of Jesus, and they want to, intermarry and interbreed. And I'm like, that's not the normal mainstream church. Like we can't confuse it. It isn't the same. It'd be like saying all Masons come from the same thing, or there's so many, or all esoteric studies, or all whatever, New Agers.
Do they own a bunch of insurance companies?
Let me tell you about that. So the top 10 holdings of the Mormon Church, funny enough, you ask, is Microsoft, Apple, Alphabet, Amazon, Nvidia, Meta, United Health Group, MasterCard, JP Morgan, and Tesla. And do not forget that underneath all this, because they fought it, but they eventually had to cough up their holdings because they are a 501c3. You can go look up their tax holdings, and they own almost every single lab in the West Coast, and they manufacture tons of all the things. It's very wild. Yeah. It's sad. And Microsoft, we go to Bill Gates. Bill Gates, he's the number one farmland owner now in America, but number 2 is the Mormon Church. And if he's your number 1 stock holding, would you want him to do well? Do you think they're in bed together? I do. I think they've all been in bed together since World War II, since
when President Nelson enacts the same exact policies regarding lockdowns and jabs and things like that as Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, and Anthony Fauci, it's because he's being directed by the same God as them.
You know, Jacob, we have much more we agree with than what we don't.
Well, it's
You and I is
interesting
homies.
too. Like even
Yes.
lockdowns and everything, they all had to be set up. The precursor was all of us getting Obamacare. And
Well,
the
the
precursor to Obamacare was Romney Care in Massachusetts. Like they were set up to
church
do that
called.
regardless. So it's almost like a ton of insider trading information. If you know the
Yes.
whole country is about to have to implement what one state is already doing, and you know, regardless of whether you win or not, I call it the vice president treatment, because if you're Dick Cheney or Al Gore, you get to become a billionaire before the president. So it's just super curious to me that Romney almost like ends up in one of these big huge corporations that's way almost seemingly more lucrative than any money that Obama's ever going to see.
100%. They all hide, and that's the thing. They hide it underneath these little things that they're doing, but actually you're 100% right. And ask Jacob, they called each not only member, not only child, everyone, if you wanted to be a good Mormon in good standing, to go get that right away. And they made a killing. They made a killing, literally, off of that.
And just speaking of killing, here's this article: Bain Capital ties to Salvadorian death squads.
Yes.
So yeah, they
Yep.
do make a killing.
Yep. And so did the Eccles, and so do, you know, I've talked about all kinds of ties. When you look into like the Marriotts, that's a big one. And speaking of the Marriotts, the funny thing is they named one of their hotels in Hawaii Kona Blue, which is a freaking file for the CIA about aliens. And I'm like, there it is. They just kind of go around and go, dude, you know, like I didn't do the actual, but you know what I mean. So, yeah.
So it's
Can I-
almost like you're
Go ahead.
saying that the Mexican drug cartels versus the Romneys, and then you have these other gang, almost like they're employing a whole nother gang that would be
Yes.
the exact gang that would go up against the Mexican drug cartels in the South End. It's like they're playing like military chess, but with these other
with Russia
don't know.
too. With Russia, it's all over the place. It's not just one country, it's all of them. And actually it's been overtaken so much in some countries that literally people stop going to the LDS church because they said that's where the mob is. That's the mob. They took it over completely and they hide underneath of that.
Where
which
are they
is
with
where
singularity? Like where are they with the computer and sentience and the AI?
Oh, they're
my
way
gosh.
beyond any other. This is where Mormonism appeals back to me again, because they are like pro-transhuman. My understanding of this is that they're pro-transhuman. I don't know. Maybe
Yes.
Jacob, speak on behalf of all Mormons of all denominations now.
All I can say is that Russell M. Nelson successfully performed the first heart transplant that used part of a pig valve. So he at least has some credentials being able to merge animals and humans.
And Russell M. Nelson is a member of Skull and Bones at University of Utah, sanctioned by Yale. So I'm just saying, like,
It would be interesting. You would use
a
the valve
100.
of the animal that you cast the demons into.
Well, I have some interesting ideas on the different things that they use the temple rites for now, because I'm not talking about the initial idea of what they were for, but what the people don't understand is if you're performing something that goes through the ether and you don't understand it, somebody's using it. And it isn't you because you don't know what it is. So if you don't know what it is and you're not searching for your HGA or any of this stuff, and you guys can just look up all kinds of information on this with parallels to Crowley, which I do have a show coming up on. So,
And there's so many people right now in conspiracy in the whole realm that they'll argue that DC is the original Rome and Rome never fell. They'll argue that Egypt is, you know, in the Grand Canyon. They'll argue that Florida is Israel. They'll do all these things and link it to all this stuff. But it's just like I mean, there's probably tons of differences, but like a big problem that biblical Christians would have is that, well, you guys all think this happened in the United States, when I would say people that aren't religious and conspiratorial right now think our entire history is stolen. They think it's all a lie. They think we were all orphan trained around the 1800s. So it just gives more credence to maybe that there's a little more age in everything here than what they're telling us is 3,000 years old. I mean, if you're just thinking about it with what everybody else is talking about now, like Gopher Woods in Florida, and there's stone anchors there, and here's all the corn's not native to Egypt, whatever the things are, but it's just like, oh, well, maybe everything's twisted a little.
I do a whole presentation on the cabbage babies, orphan trains, and DNA manipulation, and I 100% agree. They know a lot. They know a lot. Everything that is DNA related for any family history site comes from FamilySearch.org, which was started under a shell company under Howard Hughes. One of the Mormons there, and I believe, I don't want to misspeak, but I'm almost certain it was gay, started it as a shell company. And he came on one of his lucid days and was like, what the hell is this? And he even said, quote, shut that down. He's just doing that to upload all his computerized genealogy, which also came from their request from the CIA to see all the cards made by IBM in World War II to classify people. And once again, we get back to Billy Boy Gates because his mother was on the board of IBM at that time. So don't tell me it's not connected and that they're just the number one stock holding for no reason. Like BS. I call BS 100%. They're all in bed together. So.
And thank you to Base Kothar for the super chat. Thank you. You're making this work.
Yes. And so, yep, I think Jacob's right. They have definitely sold out. I believe the sellout came under, George A. Smith, and it became an NWO enterprise, basically. So
wait, what was the company name that Howard Hughes helped put together that was tracking all of this?
Oh, that wasn't Howard Hughes. Gay did it under his name, and he was ticked.
Okay.
I'll find it. Yeah, he was really upset about it. He shut it down. So I'll find it.
What was the reason for doing it under Howard Hughes' name?
Well, it was just another umbrella company, like underneath SummaCore. He was on the board anyway, and he also ended up taking a big bulk of his fortune to go over to Howard Hughes Medical, which does what? They do all kinds of deep investments in CRISPR technology, cloning stuff, all kinds of weirdo grants that they give out to these people. And that's still happening today. So that's under Howard Hughes Institute. But I'm telling you guys, they knew things before anybody else. We'll just put it that way for sure. For sure. I'm going to ask Jacob, what do you think is the key? They always say they have the key to real masonry, they have the keys. They took a picture when they got their temple in Italy down the street from not the restaurant, down the street from the Vatican. And I don't know if you saw the photo of Russell M. Nelson holding the key at St. Peter's. I'm sorry. I think they have something very important that has allowed them.
I think it's actually simpler than that. The concept since the days of Joseph Smith and him getting killed and the secession crisis, by which a few thousand followed Brigham Young out here to the west, the idea that, how do we have a legitimate claim on a monopoly on whether you get to go to God's paradise or not when you're dead? Well, Joseph had keys given to him from angelic visitors during his ministry as president of the church, and those keys of authority, that's probably the term by which we can wrap our heads around it most easily, now reside amongst the leadership of the LDS church. So when they talk about
more than that, though, do you think it's something else?
I personally don't. I believe that they are referring to the concept by which they claim a monopoly on getting back to Jesus after this life is over.
Okay, because I think Joseph Smith figured out how to do certain things. And if anybody wants to read about it, they can read the book called The Mage. And I think he channeled an HGA. And I think that he knows a lot more occultism than people really.
Remind me what an HGA is.
Holy Guardian Angel, but it's actually a demon too. And you have to do the sealings right to shut things. Or you bad things happen, and then bad things happened and he died. So I'm
Smith is similar to like Muhammad in a way.
A very similar story. They both had a fit of darkness and then saw an angelic spirit and then got up and wrote a book. No different than L. Ron Hubbard and the Babylon Workings. And all of it came with a supposed price. But this is where there will definitely be a disagreement, because I say it was from polygamy for Mormons, and Jacob doesn't believe that Joseph was a polygamist. And I can't prove either way. So, I mean, we have a lot of information on both sides.
I went the majority of my life believing that Joseph Smith was a polygamist, no issue. Wasn't until digging in that there's lots of testimony claiming Joseph Smith was a polygamist from after his death. There's very little, if any, actual evidence from Joseph's life of him being involved in the practice. Lots of testimonies.
For the record, it doesn't move the needle for me either way.
Well, and it carried on. Say Joseph didn't want to do it, and that's why he was like expired. And then Joseph, didn't do it, and Brigham did. Like the price was still paid through, just like John Dee and the wife swapping.
Yeah, it's something by which for the LDS Church control over their current members, they need to maintain the perception of monopoly on authority regarding salvation and exaltation. If Brigham Young and the others who took over the church were lying about polygamy, it really destroys that narrative of we have the keys of authority.
Yes. Yep. That's true. Yeah, I get that.
Hey, thank you, Paula D, for the super sticker. Appreciate you.
Okay, I found it. Hughes Dynamics. Hughes found out it was closed, and it was closed by him because it was, and I quote, he just set that up so the LDS Church could computerize their genealogical research, shut it down. So,
Hughes Dynamics, American computer firm, wholly owned by the subsidiary of Hughes Tool Company, 62 to 1965.
And remember, he wasn't on his own board.
And look at this. So this is, everyone knows that Wikipedia is the ultimate bastion of truth. Anything they say is absolutely true. And it says right here, by one account, Gay, who was a member of Hughes' Mormon Mafia, this is on the wiki page, of close advisors, wanted Hughes Dynamics to be staffed solely by the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. Hughes and Gay believed that such people were most trustworthy.
Yeah, and then he found out what they were doing with the uploads and shut it down. So
right, this was like a Tesla Morgan situation where it was like, you're doing what with my money?
Yeah. And speaking of, behind every really rich person, just like we bring up Elon earlier, we've got another Mormon, like Jared Birchall. His number one financial guy is a Mormon. And where did they meet?
Who do you think the Mormon in charge right now is, with Trump in presidency and Elon's there? Like, who's the Mormon? Is it one of the Romneys?
I don't know about that close. I haven't noticed really a prominent LDS like jump into the fray. I think it's kind of up for grabs, maybe.
I feel like real gangsters don't release their names, and you don't know who they are, because that's what my grandpa told me, and he was a gangster.
That's one of the most interesting parts of Howard Hughes, I think, in this whole mix, and because I was trying to figure out, Nixon for sure had been to Bohemian Grove. The Bush family for sure have been to Bohemian Grove. But when I was trying to find out if Howard Hughes had been to Bohemian Grove, if he ever went there, it would have been during the time when they still valued their secrecy. And Howard Hughes comes across to me more so than almost anyone else that we've done a deep dive, that he actually valued secrecy to the point where he practiced it. And we might never know if he was a guest of the Bohemian Club, because he would have made sure that he wasn't in one of those photos. He wasn't doing the photo ops or like telling people about it. No one even knew what this guy was doing or where he was at for decades in time, despite being one of the richest people on the planet, directly involved with the CIA. I kind of do wonder how true the Diamonds Are Forever plotline, where there wasn't a Howard Hughes for the last 10 or 20 years of his life. It was just a guy and a bank account and a voice on the phone that could call shots.
Yeah,
Well,
I kind of like from space to hollow earth, like there isn't a facet. And then you talk about aliens, and then you think of so much of just what the Mormon belief system is, and then the power structure of the stuff they might have had. It seems like they could have had similar goals if so much of these if there is an entity and an intelligence, yeah, if
Mhm.
there's an entity, that they were both in the search of it. And
Well,
so,
Chaney, to your
yeah.
point, they call their God, and brace yourself because you'll recognize it, Elohim. Well, that's not a singular person. And also, they have a mother in heaven whose name we do not say or don't know. And so, when you're talking about Elohim, it's more than one person. So, I think you're right. I think they figured it out, and I think that's why Crowley loved Joseph Smith.
Do the Mormons have their own CIA?
I think
There
they
is some
are the
heavy duty
CIA.
security. There's heavy duty security. I don't know how much they get involved in intelligence gathering and dossiers upon key individuals. I don't have knowledge on that. I would expect any corporation with those kind of financial holdings would be involved in such a thing, but I know there is quite a lot of recruitment among Latter-day Saint young men into the CIA.
Yeah, the CIA and Mormons at some point, and I would say, very quickly after it was formed, became one. I mean, there are many, 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 and they don't hide that really at all. I mean, if you look it up, but in CIA and Mormons, they'll say, yeah, we recruit them all the time because they speak two languages a lot of times. So I don't think they're hiding that at all. I do think they're hiding how deep into everything they are. And that is at the top of the top level, like an NWO type situation with the ink now, like LDS ink. So, yeah, I think they call a lot of shots. And I think they're the silent, that was the one thing they said about E. Perry Thomas. They didn't say he was the noisy kingmaker. They didn't say he was the show-off kingmaker. They called him the silent kingmaker for a reason. These people they know how to present to the utmost pristine perfectness. They know how to go under the radar. And what's the first thing that anybody will say to you is about Mormons? Oh, they're the nicest people. Well, that might be true, but you don't know the intentions of everyone. I think that they hide. I do. I don't think every Mormon.
Well, I think of the insult that Jesus gave, thou whited sepulcher, and then Peter gave a similar one. Thou whited wall. In other words, it's insults meant to say you're just trying to look good on the outside, but inwardly you got some pretty bad evil inside of there. So I know from just observing in my own family and people in general, Latter-day Saints highly value being perceived as nice and generous. A lot of it is incredibly sincere, but there's also those to where we don't talk about uncomfortable things. We avoid disagreements because the niceness can be a facade, especially when there's discussion about why is the president of the church a member of Skull and Bones? Why is he publishing about advancing from Skull and Bones onto Owl and Key? That sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. The niceness goes away if there's ever a conversation like that is attempted.
Yep, agree. And you will be considered anti-Mormon propaganda, and you're in the wrong, and it doesn't matter what you say, and you're the bad person, especially if you raised your voice, because now you're just terrible. So, yep, they don't like any of that. Very passive aggressive.
I actually find pro-Mormon propaganda infinitely more interesting than anti-Mormon propaganda.
Give me an example of that.
This would be considered anti-Mormon propaganda. Us just discussing the actual facts. It's anti-Mormon.
An example of pro-Mormon propaganda, Battlestar Galactica is probably one of my favorite
I was going to say that.
It's all so hopeful and sci-fi and progressive, and like it's fascinating. And even the stuff that Heidi's like, oh, they're summoning Satan. I don't know. That sounds kind of cool. If you're making little
amulets, so conspiratorial,
and treasure hunting. This is so cool.
Yeah, I feel like they're telling you so much about political stuff, about like CIA, shadow government stuff. I think
they didn't tell us this.
They were ahead of their time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you mean the show? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I was like, they didn't tell us. Whoa. We'd
what
be
about
in trouble
Billy Barty, the like most famous little person?
Who?
Billy Barty. He was a Mormon. Yeah, and like old school Hollywood. Like if you look him up, it's like the little actor that you know, and you'll be like, "Oh, we know this dude." He's like with the most.
I
famous-
remember him on UHF with Weird Al.
Oh my God!
remember him.
Rumpelstiltskin, Snow White,
Mhm.
Masters of the Universe, Willow. Yeah, you've seen them, all of them. Legend.
I think that there is more to the keys than we know, because I think that all of this space stuff and Werner von Braun's, intertwining into things and all this, I think there's a lot more that they're talking about. And I also think it's weird that Joseph Smith was digging for treasure, and then you understand about theosophy, and I'm like, but was he, or was it treasure?
Huh.
Yeah.
It's curious if you got Trump saying we have gold under our feet, we have gold under our feet, and it's like, huh.
And where did Elon Musk meet the Mormon Jared Burchell? At the Boring Company, where they were tunneling. Where did Seymour Cray get his knowledge for the supercomputer? Tunneling. I'm sorry, there's something up. Like it, yeah.
Yeah, we keep looking up at the SpaceX rockets, but no one's asking what Boring's up to.
Yep. They are up to building underground passages for only Tesla cars, and like, oh, looky, you can just skip the traffic in Las Vegas because we built you a tunnel. Lies. You were looking for something and you had to cover it up. So that's what you did.
That's exactly what I think about that Titan submarine. And so there's so much about like the billionaires don't travel in those kind of subs. We all know Ghislaine Maxwell's sub. We've all seen pictures of it. And so yeah,
Howard
I just
Hughes
think
attached
that's
to
what I
us,
was going to say. Howard Hughes again and again and again with these space race people, or these people that believe in this sort of stuff enough to spend all this money on aerodynamics, also are into the pressurization of the ocean. Like they seem to be the exact same hunt. And so it does seem like they're into tunnels or portals or know about something or have discovered something.
Let's get real. They know. They know about a whole lot more than they ever going to tell us. And I think Thomas is right. If they just come clean with it and stop dicking around with the CIA and banks, maybe they'd have their members come back.
I'll be a member, but I'm not giving up any tithing. So they probably don't even want me. I'm like a worthless member in that case.
Well, you got to at least agree to the tithing for you to be baptized. You can give it up shortly thereafter and still maintain the free level of membership. But if you want the premium, premium membership, it costs a monthly installments.
It's like signing up for Netflix and then just binge watching the one show you cared about and then like not paying after that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yep, that's it for sure. I think there's a lot more going on with this project that they were doing than meets the eye here too.
Well, so this is something that we're probably going to do a bunch more Hughes shows because of how deep this rabbit hole go. We didn't even get into the JFK stuff. You talk about alien stuff, the submarine stuff. I just want to throw out one of my favorite theories that I've heard. Oh, I'm not going to say I've integrated this into my life, but that the air is really the sea and that the sea is really space or something. Like everything's been inverted. So when Howard Hughes was actually building these submarines, or when we're trying to drill into the earth, that's actually a version of going into space, and that they've been trying to trick us about this. But this one particular Project Azorian, I think I'm pronouncing that right. And this is from the CIA website, like their own legacy page about this. And it says, imagine standing atop the Empire State Building with an 8-foot wide grappling hook and a 1-inch diameter steel rope. Your task is to lower the hook to the street below, snag a compact car full of gold, and lift the car back to the top of the building. And on top of that, the job has to be done without anyone noticing. This is what the CIA and Project Azorian, a highly secret 6-year effort to retrieve a sunken Soviet submarine from the Pacific Ocean floor during the Cold War. Now, the thing that's interesting is that coincidentally, whenever CIA is involved, they always get really lucky on the coincidences. Coincidentally, where this particular Soviet submarine apparently sunk was one of the lowest points in the ocean floor that we had access to. So that when Heidi, you're hinting at like there was more to this,
it gets into the abyss.
They found if you want to get into Hollow Earth, you don't start at the top of a mountain. You start at the lowest possible point you can start at to begin with. So you've already let nature do most of the digging for you. and that this was some of the rumors about the real Project Azorian, is that they found this low point in the ocean, and they said drill there because now we don't have to drill this extra 2 or 3 miles through the ocean bed, and that's what they were doing. They weren't trying to recover some Soviet sub. They were drilling down, and whatever they found, in typical Howard Hughes fashion, we don't really know. Like, this actually stayed secret.
I want to say this. The Azores are a group of islands in the Atlantic Ocean that have been suggested as the location of the lost city of Atlantis. Oh, yeah. Anyway, they know. It's always, I mean, come on, you know.
It's only a 12-hour flight from Miami. We can book a ticket right now for $700.
There we go. All of us. Could you imagine the menace? Oh my gosh.
Oh my
Talk
gosh,
about
that's the funnest trip though. Look
Mormon
how beautiful that place
up in
is.
the house.
It looks like Godzilla though. and
Jacob
King
will
Kong.
baptize you in there. I'm pretty sure, Thomas.
Sounds
I'm
good.
down.
We'll get
Jacob,
you.
you can
We'll-
baptize me anytime, my friend.
okay, we'll have to have a discussion or two first, so you know what you're getting into. Make out your tithing checks to Bearded Wonder.
Are the misty peaks of the Azores remnants of Atlantis? Question mark. I mean, come on. They put it right in our face and nobody gets it. I don't think that the Mormon people understand that there are mystery schools inside the Mormon church that only certain people get to go to, right? And that's why the Mount Olympus gods live in Mount Olympus. Like, come on with it now. Let's quit it.
Yep.
And that's why
Fire
there's
to the
people
peak.
on the sun and the moon. Whatever.
Airships, I know, and think of that. You could think of how long an airship could just stay or float wherever it needed to. They couldn't have that. They needed just plain flight.
So the airships come up in my CIA dig. Of course they do, with the Cosmos Club. Yeah. It's such a rabbit hole that I was like, this is insane. This is literally crazy.
I didn't want to
And-
totally derail about jump rooms, but it just makes me feel like, we've talked about other things, time travel things, Mars jump room things. And it just is like, what did Howard Hughes have to do with this? What do the Mormons have to do with this? I just think everything real secret is underground. It's not like in a hangar at Area 51. It's inside the mountains. It's underground, and it's been caverns that were secret before they got there.
Well,
They were-
Chaney, I don't know if you knew this, but Joseph Smith had a Jupiter talisman and a Mars dagger. Might want to look at those sigils.
I
called
didn't
the
know about the
Jupiter
Mars
jump room.
dagger.
Mars dagger was his family dagger, and then the parchments. And so when you look at these parchments, if you look at one of my old episodes, like talking about this stuff, and if you just put in Heidi Love on Spotify, I'm sure it will come up when it says occult Mormon history. It will show you all of it. It's And so when they say the intelligence of Mars is on this knife, okay, when they say the intelligence of anything, Chaney, do you know what this means? I am assuming Thomas does. Intelligence. What is an intelligence?
Well, like the CIA? Or
No, like so I'll just say, okay, so it's a demon. An intelligence sounds
okay.
not scary, but it's a demon. And so when you're talking about lower level, possibly Elohim, meaning plurality of things that are not of this world, that's technically the definition of Elohim. It doesn't mean it's
what
just
did it say
the
about
name of God.
Scorpion on that?
You need to find that Occult Mormonism show. I'll send it to you.
Oh yeah, that's so interesting because it says something right underneath one of those about Scorpio and the intelligence of Mars. The copy shows.
Yes.
Yeah, it says on one side is the seal of Mars, and on the other side of the dagger, it says Adonai, Scorpio, and intelligence of Mars.
Thomas is acting like he doesn't know because he can't say or he'll get his throat slit. But this all goes back to John Dee. and I just find it like they didn't practice folk magic. You'll look this up. If you look it up under mine, I give it the real. If you look it up under church people that are put out there,
You
to say
keep
what
talking
they
about
need to
Olympus
say.
too, and
Yes.
it's like
Solomonic.
like
they
Scorpio,
are practicing.
you would have to have a knife to either control the scorpions or kill the scorpions. And that's what you need right before you hit Medusa. And you need Medusa so you can control the Kraken.
Well,
Like Clash of the Titans is in so much of the story that it's just like, is Medusa's head some relic we never hear about? Like we hear about the Spear of Destiny or the Ark of the Covenant. And so it's just like so much of all of these things attached to these like lowercase deities.
there is a whole rabbit hole when you get into Solomonic magic, which I say that Joseph knew because of his protege. Like he looked up to, not his protege, the guy he was with that taught him a bunch of things is Lumen Walters. And they either hate it or love it, but thank you, because I hate it about my laugh. So Lumen Walters, even the name alone, Lumen, light bearer. Walters, okay, he's a doctor that was traveling in France, and me and Thomas have talked about this because I'm like, they always say the Scottish Rite, but the Scottish Rite doesn't make any sense because of the time frame where it was being put together. Thomas was like, that's not too good of a time frame with Joseph Smith and have it get clear over here to America and blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah, I never thought of that. So I went on a Martinism kick, and I'm not the only one. And Dan Vogel also knows about the Martinism kick, and he's
I spoke with a
absolutely
Martinist recently,
against
like
it.
like a
Ike
like
Baker?
an outward
Is it
advocating
Ike?
Martinism.
Yeah. Is it Ike Baker? No.
It was awesome. I like
Yeah.
Ike Baker.
Yeah. Ike Baker. Yeah. I want to have him on. Yeah. He's the only one I know of that really talks about it. And I was shocked when I heard him. I was like, whoa, we did a whole show on this breakdown of how I feel like Martinism fits way better because it is Freemasonry, but they're practicing magicians of Solomonic magic, and it goes together. I'm telling you guys, it's I don't know, you know.
Gonna say that. I was just gonna say, I was like, I can't stop thinking about it from the show Severance, Lumen, and like I always thought that was a weird name.
The 2 times a year, Martinists believe that they can conjure spirits to talk to them is on the fall equinox and the spring equinox. And Joseph Smith got the plates on the fall equinox. And I'm just like, there's too many correlations. It's a lot.
It's so interesting, the equinoxes around Joseph Smith's life, because he was born 1 or 2 days after the winter equinox, and he was killed, I think, 1 or 2 days after the summer equinox.
Yes. Yep. I'm telling you guys, there is a story there that the church does not want out. And here's the thing. I feel like Thomas, if they would just let it go, like let your freak flag fly, like maybe they would be better off. Like let it go back to the old roots of the thing. I'm still not going to join. But like for people that are in it and want to do these things, why are they removing everything from it?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
seriously,
there's been so much damage with people finding out later, wait, this is my history. When
Right.
I know for me, so many things were not particularly shocking to me about Mormon/LDS history because I learned about it in my younger years. So when I heard about it again in my 20s, didn't have shock value. I love the idea of radical transparency.
I'm just saying, if there's anyone in LDS Inc. of any power out there that can like make changes, but all I hear, and everyone close your ears, Heidi, close your ears, Jacob, close your ears. But what I hear when people start talking about all these, like, oh my God, the Meadow Mountain Massacre, and oh my God, polygamy, and oh, everyone gets a collab space. Isn't that so silly? I hear that there's a religion out there that has space cowboys and magic daggers, and I am all in from the
Sign
very
me
premise
up.
of this. Yeah.
Where are these missionaries? Wait. Who are these missionaries who showed up? They're just trying to tell me about Jesus.
Well, and they want to keep us from weird woo-woo stuff like anthroposophy and theosophy, because then as an outward person, now that I'm out on the outside and I'm looking into all these things, if you look into Steiner's work, if you look into Blavatsky's work, you're like, oh my hell, is this what this means? This is what this means. And then as soon as you start putting the pieces together, you're like, well, why'd they lie to me then? I don't like that. I don't like being lied to, like that's crap.
How much of realism is close to Mormonism?
Oh, it's in there. That's in there as well. But, that's a branch off. That realism comes up not only in my Cabbage Babies presentation, but in my CIA presentation, because realism comes off of the CIA front church that was all made by David Ferry and all them, and then it flips and turns into, you know, the Manson people and realism. And I was like, what? Like literally, Chaney, every single thing is connected, and every
That's what
time
I
turn
think
the corner,
too. And I think
I
it's
was
more
like,
magic than people want to think it is,
it
because
is
it makes the programming and propaganda of us becoming an adult, paying taxes and being responsible, all these little words of being
normal,
adult. It means
normal.
you can't think magic is real. And that's why it's like really programmed into your like Disney youth, Harry Potter brain.
Harry Potter was
Yes.
huge.
And so all
That-
this stuff, the more you look into really any religion, there's relics and, you know, there's sigils and there's dates that matter and there's stars that matter. And it's like everything seems like it matters a lot more, but
Look up
everybody
the
treats
Harry
it so
Potter
silly.
show we did on the monthly Mormon Monday. It's all over the place. They took their dead body coffins and made canes out of them and put their hair inside the knob. What the F is going on? Like, quit lying to me. You know, like,
Do you
I know
want to
what's
win this
going on
wizard
now.
war or not? I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Go get your Gandalf staff and cut the shit out. Like, what are you doing? You know? I'm like, stop lying to everybody. And then you have to learn it so far around the way that by the time you do, you're pissed off. You know, you're like, wait. And so I don't think they should be doing that. Or maybe they should just start two separate churches. Like, you want to get rich, go to George A. Smith's church. And if you want to have the woo woo, go to Joseph Smith's church. But I think they killed him because he started talking about it more out in the open. You know, I mean, his last speech, that Follett sermon, I'm just saying, I think I got him killed. So, you know,
There's so
I
many
feel-
celebrities that have gone through my brain that I'm like, what does the
Oh.
Titanic and the Abyss have to do with the
my
Mormon
God.
church? What is this? Like, I'm like, James Cameron, what's his connection there? But then also the wives,
Mormons
because
are
you said
always
about
there.
like Howard Hughes's girlfriend. So then it's like Howard Hughes can have one thing, but like the Gabor sisters, who were they? What kind of red sparrows were the Gabors? And so it's just like you go through each of these celebrities and who has attachments where in Hollywood, and you're just like, gosh,
Right. What does this mean?
and it makes me wonder, like, you know, we have one idea where people are like the patriarchy or whatever about certain religions, but I always think the people that we never mention them have more power than you think. And so it just makes me like, we never talk about Mormons really, like in the grand scheme of things. So it makes me think, oh, they got a little more power. Yeah, that's the only thing people think about. And then they compartmentalize the women right into that polygamy idea, like, oh, they're faceless and nameless. But I'm like, gosh, if you were a Mormon woman, you could just scroll through with this certain amount of power, like that Real Housewives of Beverly Hills lady, and no one would even theorize that. Like, it makes me just think of like even spies.
It's
like
so much.
Howard Hughes hangs out with the Gabor sisters and then sends them off to a prince somewhere, and then they can change all this information and no one's checking. They just have it in their brain. It's just pillow talk. So
well, Jacob knows at the top of the last highest degree that you can receive from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Mormons. Who gives that blessing, Jacob? Do you know? The top
so when the second anointing is extended by invitation from the top church leaders to perhaps somebody who has been a stake president and been faithful, they receive what's supposed to be, this is what Jesus would perform specifically upon you if he were here. It is the wife that pronounces a blessing upon the husband's head inside of the temples. A woman.
In a patriarchal, and they used to do it inside your marital bedroom. Tell me it's not sex magic. Tell me something's not going on there where they tell us from birth, your 12-year-old son has more authority than you do. But what about Huntington? What about that woman that had the best outcomes on her priesthood blessings because Joseph let women give them? And she had the best outcomes. She's one of my relatives. And when you look at all of this stuff, you start seeing that this isn't what it seems
my mind's
to be.
blowing right now. You guys, the Mormons are all into, like, even the magic underwear is saving DNA. So if they're all into structuring and saving and categorizing, and they've had a computer that they've been running that we just read about on Wiki since the 60s to categorize this DNA stuff, then this magic underwear is essentially just absorbing DNA from the woman and the man that they can
Or what if it's a
categorize.
portal? Or what if
Yeah.
it's got the symbols over openings? Your nipples are openings. Your umbilicus is an opening. What part of that?
They told Howard Hughes how important bodily fluids were, and that is why he started storing his piss.
Yes. And
They told him, don't let him even cut your nails. Like and
hair.
And that shit seems magical. That's like witch shit. Like,
and why did they dig up
spell?
Why did they dig up Joseph Smith to cut his hair? Why did they dig up Joseph Smith's rotting corpse box to make canes? You're right. It's fluids. It's magic. The magic is in what? Why is it called skull and
But I
bones
could take your hair and I could take all the DNA from probably both your parents are probably somewhere in your hair. And so then think of, and probably the structure of our DNA and everything, we'd need this quantum computer that would eventually be able to dissect everything. And so then messenger RNA really could just make you grow wings.
I'm thinking about selling stock in my beard for after I'm dead.
Well, put it in a cane.
We'll do like a Patreon exclusive for Paranoid American fans, and
we'll send hair.
Nail clippings, hair, pee, underwear, everything.
Well, the cane, isn't that the 7 and the 007?
You need to look at that episode. It was actually really a weird parallel when we did that episode and I started doing research for it. I was like, whoa. And some of this stuff, when you find out like that, you're just like, okay, that makes sense. Like, why do they have such a huge genealogy vault, right? Blown out of the side of a mountain. And it's guarded
it's a
like
real
crazy.
Seed bank. It's, you know how they tell us like, oh, in the North Pole or wherever, Greenland, they're storing heirlooms of all these seeds. The heirlooms of your seeds would be way more important. Like, and like
who is their number one? Yeah, stockholding, Bill Gates. Don't forget.
It's just saying.
Now that you brought up Bill Gates, I think this might be a good time to start winding us down. We've got plenty more we can talk. This can go on for 5 or 6 hours.
Oh, for sure.
Everyone go and like walk around and enjoy life outside. Jacob can get outside of the parking lot, but I'm gonna do a little round robin here. We'll start with Chaney. Chaney, do all your plugs. Tell people where they can find you and everything else you got going on.
Jacob and Heidi, this has been so informative and something that I don't know a lot about. It's blowing my mind. I have like a whole list of things. So thank you, Thomas, for having me. You can find me at Project Chaney anywhere. Secret Society of Good Guys every Friday night. And I just produce a couple of rad podcasts if you want to check out Lunatic Fringe with My Maria or Club Maha on X. You should hit those things up. So yeah.
All right, you're up, Big J.
My name is Jacob Isbell. You can look me up on social media. I come up rather easily. It's not like I have my own website. On YouTube, I have a channel called Disciple of Christ. The logo looks like the cover of the copy of the Book of Mormon. And I do interviews, and geez Louise, if you live somewhere close to me, a time or two during the year, I make tacos and invite a whole bunch of people. Heidi's even been out and watched me inflict violence upon somebody with whom I had an online disagreement. Heidi, as I turn it over to you, tell about how fun this wrestling match was and what the outcome was. You actually took my glorious victory picture.
I did. I took his profile picture and got the moment that he had submission from his enemy. So I got to meet Jacob in person. Yes. And he won. And I was pretty excited about that. It was fun. And Thomas won't come visit. We'll get Chaney to come.
I want to so badly. I want to go to Salt Lake City. In fact, I was jealous that Donut was out there like twice over this last month.
So here's what you got me thinking about. Heidi, you should come with me sometime, and we need to document and turn a whole episode into the satanic symbolism that's around the park in Salt Lake City that was hit by the tornado, the pentagrams, the altars. Out in plain view, there is really, really clear signs of Satanism in the top spots of Salt Lake City.
Yeah, we should do that. That is fun. And I am actually super excited to see when they unveil the temple, if they've scrubbed all of the old things off of it. I think the cloud stones, moonstones, all of that, I think a lot of it will be gone, and especially the pentagrams and pentacles, because they can't really explain those. So I am Heidi Love. I am, if nothing but a conspiracy theorist, but I am well researched. And so come and see me at Unfiltered Rise. I'm everywhere podcasts are served. I do have my own website, unfilteredrisepodcast.com. And on Patreon, I do a little extra for my Patreon members. Instead of cutting my shows short or doing anything that would hold back information, I give you 2 extra shows a month that are off the beaten path, more about Mormons, mayhems, and murders. And so like Israel Keys was famous murderer, very maniacal, and he was a Mormon. So I bring all the deeds and always receipts. So come check me out.
And I guess that just leaves me. I am Paranoid American. And I would highly suggest you join the Patreon soon. Like, do it this month, because I'm going to be sending out some cool little exclusives to some of the Patreons. The lighting is bad in here, but I've got a little occult Disney pin and a whole bunch of other things. I did a survey recently. What do people want? They want stickers, they want trading cards, they want pins, and more content. So I'm doing all of those things, and I'll be sending out like some physical goodies to people in the mail, even if you're not even in the States, even if you're in like Japan or somewhere weird like Hawaii or other Mormon places. I'll still get you some cool stuff out there. So one other bonus, I think this is the first live show that I'm also doing shout outs to all the Patreons and all the YouTube members. Your names are now in the credits. I've doxed all of you, so just be on the lookout for ICE and CIA and ATF and all those places. Does anyone else have anything else to say until we cut the hell out of here?
That Thomas has the same glasses worn by the most LDS presidents of the church. Spencer W. Kimball, Gordon B. Hinckley, Ezra Taft Benson. They all had your glasses, Thomas. You might as well just join.
Oh, boy.
I'm ready. I've heard the dark frame is what makes you look smarter, so that's what we're going for.
Oh, Jacob likes the beard instead. Bigger beard, more smarts.
Thomas and I come from the vintage when Mormons were long-bearded radicals, not clean-cut conformists.
That's right. Bring the Danites back. Oh, wait, don't.
All right. I love all you guys, Chaney, Heidi, Jacob, equally. Thank you so much for being here. You're all invited back always on all other shows. So hopefully we do this again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you guys.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real, the real, you will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blood smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.